One summer afternoon in the small town of Arlington, Indiana, seemed as peaceful as any other day. In a place with only a few hundred residents, everyone knew each other. Everyone trusted each other. But that very peace concealed a terrible secret. On June 7, 2023, 17-year-old Valerie Tyndall left home for work. She said she would be back for dinner. But as night fell, Valerie didn't return. Her phone went silent. And in the small house, fear began to creep in. The last person to see Valerie was her neighbor across the street, a 59-year-old man who used to hire her to mow the lawn. He said she might have run away. But the words came too quickly. Too certainly. Months passed. Seasons passed. Then, one late autumn day, the police and FBI returned to his property. Amidst a strange pile of rubbish, they unearthed a wooden box. Inside was the body of a young girl. Her nails were painted bright orange, the exact color Valerie posted on Facebook before she disappeared. It wasn't just the death of a girl, but a chilling warning: sometimes evil isn't in the shadows. It stands right at your doorstep. Valerie Tyndall was born on August 29, 2005, in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA, into a large family. She had one brother and 3 older sisters. When Valerie was young, she experienced an unpleasant event, though the details were kept private by her family. Following that incident, her mother decided the family should move somewhere safer, a decision everyone supported. They moved to Arlington, a small town less than an hour's drive from Indianapolis. With a population of about 300, Valerie's parents hoped it would be a peaceful environment to raise their children, far from the hustle and bustle of the big city. Thanks to their friendly and positive personalities, the whole family quickly integrated into the local community. Life remained calm and stable until the summer of 2023. Valerie, then 17, was preparing for her final year of high school. She was full of expectations for this school year, hoping to graduate soon and begin her adult life. Besides her studies, she loves animals, enjoys taking care of children, and has dreamed of becoming a veterinarian since elementary school. She has always strived to achieve that goal. As a senior, Valerie worked multiple jobs to save money for college, as she didn't want to be a burden on her family. Normally, she took Wednesdays off to meet friends. But that day was different. Even though it was Wednesday, she told her mother she was going to work. By June 7, 2023, during summer break, Valerie was focused on working and saving money for college rather than relaxing. She held several jobs and typically took Wednesdays off to spend time with friends. However, on this particular Wednesday, June 7, 2023, she told her mother she was going to work. That day, Valerie planned to visit her neighbor, Patrick Scott, 59, who lived across the street. She often helped him tend his large lawn, and he paid her. He had a gardening business and sometimes hired her when he had a lot of work. They often referred to each other as friends, though Valerie's family suspected Patrick might have a different interest in her. Her mother grew uneasy when Valerie said she would spend the whole day working for him. Although Valerie's family had known Patrick for years and considered him polite and friendly, especially since Valerie was also friends with his granddaughter, her mother couldn't shake her concern. Patrick assured her that everything was appropriate, and his calm manner eased her doubts. Over time, the two families maintained a good relationship, and Valerie continued working for him regularly. By the summer of 2023, Valerie had been helping Patrick for about 2 years. Her mother believed he truly supported Valerie's ambitions and saw his jobs as an opportunity for her daughter to earn money for college and build experience for the future. Valerie played an important role in convincing her mother because Patrick paid her well and offered her steady work. However, there were reasons to doubt Patrick's character. According to her mother, he had staged dramatic scenes several times, and sometimes acted like a jealous boyfriend toward Valerie. Despite being much older, he often made insulting remarks about the boys she spent time with, which seemed inappropriate. After working together for a while, Valerie gradually became more comfortable with Patrick's strange behavior and simply attributed it to his eccentricity. Her family also felt reassured, as Patrick had a good reputation and was respected in the community. On June 7, 2023, Valerie planned to spend most of the day mowing lawns for Patrick's clients. She promised to be home in time for dinner, but when night fell, she still hadn't returned. Concerned, her mother tried calling her, but the phone remained unanswered. When Valerie's mother asked Patrick about her, he said that she hadn't worked with him that day and that they had no plans to go anywhere together. Her mother was stunned. She couldn't understand why Valerie would lie. She tried to calm herself by assuming that Valerie had gone out with friends or perhaps was seeing a new boyfriend she hadn't mentioned. Still, she planned to question Valerie once she returned. Since her daughter was normally open and self-reliant, that evening, Patrick and his wife, Linda, went to Valerie's house. Instead of offering comfort, Patrick suggested that Valerie had probably run away. He presented his theory confidently, but after a while, Valerie's mother began to sense something was wrong. Patrick seemed to grasp the situation too quickly. While Valerie hadn't been missing long enough to draw such a conclusion, there was no reason to believe Valerie had run away. She had never done so before, and she had no mental health issues or addictions. This disappearance was completely out of character. The more she thought about it, the more suspicious her mother became. She sensed Patrick was trying to manipulate her thoughts and steer the story in his favor. She started to wonder if he had something to do with Valerie's disappearance, which might explain why he was trying to influence her so strongly. Still, she decided to wait before contacting the police, hoping Valerie would return on her own. That night, she remained convinced her daughter was simply out with friends and would come home soon. But when the family woke up on the morning of June 8, 2023, and Valerie's room was still empty, her mother panicked. Since she still couldn't reach Valerie, she called the police. Valerie Tyndall was officially reported missing, and an Amber Alert was issued. According to the family, Valerie was last seen around noon on June 7. Her mother shared her growing suspicions with investigators, who agreed that Valerie might be in danger. Police distributed her description, photo, and details of her car, including its make, model, and license plate number. They began a serious search and quickly questioned Patrick, not only because of his ambiguous relationship with Valerie, but also because she disappeared while on her way to work for him. Patrick had already been screened and had no criminal record, especially not for violent behavior. When first questioned by police, he appeared nervous and claimed he hadn't seen Valerie on June 7, saying their last meeting was on June 6. At first, his story seemed believable, but the police already had statements from other witnesses that contradicted him. Several witnesses reported seeing Patrick and Valerie together on June 7, the day she went missing. Some even multiple times. One woman said she saw Patrick driving Valerie's car. This immediately raised suspicion. When Patrick learned the police had this information, he changed his story. Now admitting that he had seen Valerie on the morning of June 7, he said he had driven Valerie's car to take her to a nearby town about 10 minutes from Arlington, dropped her off, and never saw her again. During the following days, as the police continued to question him, Patrick's story kept changing slightly. His final version during interrogation was that on June 7, he and Valerie met at a store in Shelbyville. He used his company car, and Valerie asked to be dropped off in a neighboring town. Patrick said that when she got out, she walked toward a light blue pickup truck driven by an unknown man, and he never saw her after that. However, shortly afterward, Patrick changed his statement again. He said that he hadn't dropped Valerie off anywhere, but had only driven her around town before returning home. A neighbor asked him to house sit while they went to work, so he left Valerie there. When he returned, she was gone. He assumed she had gone home. But when her mother came looking for her daughter, he realized something was amiss. Patrick insisted that he didn't know where Valerie was. However, investigators quickly determined that his story wasn't entirely true. He had at least admitted that Valerie had been at his house, which was the last confirmed location. Police also suspected he lied about being at work all day, which deepened their suspicions. To investigate further, police asked Patrick to hand over his phone. He handed it over willingly. Phone data revealed that he hadn't gone to work at all but had spent almost the entire day of June 7 on his property. The message records between him and Valerie were also revealing. Valerie had sent Patrick a single message on June 7 at 11:23 a.m., saying she would be joining him soon. Patrick sent her 2 messages afterward, one at 5:40 p.m. on June 7 and another at 2:46 p.m. on June 8, asking where she was. This evidence showed that Patrick had been lying from the beginning. He clearly knew about their planned meeting, and his attempts to contact her later appeared to be an act. Investigators also learned that Valerie's mother had given Patrick full access to her daughter's location data through the AppLife 360 app in 2021. When Valerie started working for him, this meant Patrick could see Valerie's location in real time and didn't need to ask her where she was. It seemed he was deliberately trying to distance himself from her disappearance and build a false alibi. Despite their suspicions, the police did not have enough evidence to arrest Patrick. His constantly changing statements and attempts to mislead investigators, however, made him the main suspect. Investigators wanted to search his home, but needed a search warrant to do so. They decided to charge him with giving multiple false statements that had obstructed the investigation. While this was not enough for an arrest, it provided grounds for a search. Surprisingly, the thorough search of Patrick's house revealed nothing. The search for Valerie continued for months. It became increasingly clear that Valerie was unlikely to be found alive. She had been completely inactive on social media, had made no financial transactions, and had not used her phone. At one point, the investigation appeared to have reached a dead end. After that, on October 11, 2023, the investigators decided to carefully examine Patrick Scott's property. This time, they brought along specially trained sniffer dogs, believing Patrick was connected to the disappearance. Remarkably, all 4 dogs instantly picked up the scent of a corpse and ran in the same direction, toward a small pond on the property. The officers called in a diving team, but no body was found. Still, the dogs continued reacting to the water. Handlers explained that this response was expected, as dogs can detect even trace amounts of scent that might have been carried by the wind and absorbed by the water. Although Valerie's body wasn't found, the dog's behavior strengthened suspicions that she had been on Patrick's property. As a result, investigators ordered an aerial topographical survey for the next day. This survey aimed to detect recently disturbed soil, which could indicate a burial site. Several areas on the property showed signs of soil disruption, but none led to concrete results. The investigation once again stalled for several weeks. Valerie remained officially missing, as there was still no definitive proof of her death. 7 weeks after the aerial survey, the case took a new turn. On November 28, 2023, investigators decided to inspect Patrick's property one more time. This time, both local law enforcement and FBI agents were involved. During the aerial review, they noticed a strange pile of garbage in an area far from the house, an unusual place to dump household waste. Investigators suspected the pile could be concealing something. Using specialized equipment, they detected shallow cavities under the mound. When the site was excavated, a wooden box emitting a strong odor was uncovered. Inside, they found the body of a girl wrapped in black plastic. Due to decomposition, her identity was initially uncertain, but investigators noticed her bright orange nail polish, matching the color Valerie had posted about on social media the day before she disappeared. The body was later confirmed to be Valerie Tyndall. Patrick Scott, 59, was arrested and charged with her kidnapping and murder. After his arrest, Patrick resisted but was eventually subdued. During interrogation, he confessed. He said he had met Valerie on June 7 at an apartment complex in Shelbyville, having lured her there with a promise of lunch at a restaurant in Indianapolis. Around 1:00 p.m., he brought her to his home. Less than 30 minutes earlier, her phone had gone inactive. Patrick admitted to abusing Valerie and using his belt in the attack, a belt he reportedly continued to wear until his arrest. Afterward, he returned home and tried to delete app data and digital activity from his phone. However, he overlooked the Apple Health app, which retained crucial movement and time records that later supported the investigation. Patrick claimed that Valerie tried to blackmail him into buying her a new car, threatening to tell everyone that he had seduced her if he refused. This led to an argument that escalated into a fight, during which Patrick attacked her in a moment of rage. He insisted the killing was not intentional and blamed it on losing control. The incident took place in Patrick's bedroom. Upon realizing he had killed Valerie, Patrick took her body to the home office, a place other family members never visited. The body remained there for nearly a day, wrapped only in plastic wrap. On June 8, Patrick bought boards from a hardware store to build a makeshift box to bury the body. He stated that there was already a hole on his property, and he planned to fill it with cement. The size of the hole was perfect for Valerie's grave. When questioned, he could not explain how the hole had appeared, raising suspicions that the killing was premeditated and the hole had been dug in advance. Patrick later claimed he had planned to use it to dispose of old video cassettes. Investigators doubted this explanation. Why would anyone bury tapes instead of simply throwing them away? A new police report later revealed more about the case. It stated that Patrick invited Valerie to his home intending to seduce her. When she refused, he became enraged, killed her, and then buried her in the homemade wooden box. Investigators also determined what happened to Valerie's car. Witnesses saw Patrick driving it on June 7. To hide his involvement, he drove the car to a nearby suburb, removed the license plates, abandoned it near a housing development, and threw the keys into a river. The car was eventually found, but the keys were not, and Patrick later claimed he couldn't remember where he had thrown them. In early 2024, Patrick began denying any relationship with Valerie beyond friendship and work. But the evidence contradicted him. They had spent a lot of time together, shopping, eating in cafes, and even visiting a water park. As shown by photographs, Valerie's mother remembered her daughter asking for permission for that trip, believing Patrick was there with his family. Patrick's wife had also noticed his growing interest in Valerie but assumed it stemmed from his fondness for children and Valerie's friendship with their granddaughter. Nobody imagined that this seemingly kind man had inappropriate feelings for a 17-year-old girl. However, the investigation proved that Patrick had feelings for Valerie. What bothered the police most was his indifference, completely cold when talking about his crime and the young girl he had murdered. However, some people blamed Valerie's parents, arguing that her mother had ignored warning signs and trusted Patrick too much. Until the case was solved, no one realized how deceitful he truly was. Valerie's mother believed her daughter only worked for him. He was seen as a close family friend. Valerie had worked for Patrick for over 2 years, during which he gained her and her family's complete trust. She was also close to his granddaughter, which gave him further access to her. At a recent press conference, Valerie's family spoke about the trauma they endured and how Patrick's behavior changed once the search for Valerie began. He became withdrawn, avoiding her family and displaying hostility towards them. Whenever her mother tried to speak to him during the 5-month investigation, he would quickly flee into the house. During the investigation, it was discovered that a few weeks after Valerie's disappearance, witnesses saw Patrick burning various items in his backyard. He had built a large fire and had even torn down a shed to get wood for fuel. This behavior seemed suspicious, and investigators suspected he was destroying additional evidence. Patrick refused to comment on the matter. On December 14, a funeral service for 17-year-old Valerie was held at the Christian church in Arlington. Nearly the entire congregation attended. The entire community still couldn't believe that in their close-knit neighborhood, there could be such a cruel person capable of taking the life of a young girl. Patrick's trial for kidnapping and murder was scheduled for April 2024. Because he confessed to his crime, the trial was conducted under a simplified procedure, sparing Valerie's family from having to endure further pain by reliving the entire incident. Patrick maintained his confession, yet it was believed he might not fully grasp the severity of his crime. He went on to claim that Valerie had tried to blackmail him into buying her a new car. Ultimately, Patrick Scott accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. Under the agreement, he was sentenced to 57 years in prison. Valerie Tyndall's family was satisfied with the sentence. As given Patrick's age, he will likely spend the rest of his life in jail. While you can't control everything in life, leaving your safety to chance is a dangerous gamble. On the night of April 25, 1990, several motorists were driving near a motel on a remote stretch of road in Oklahoma City when they noticed scattered women's belongings lying across the asphalt. Curious, they stopped and found a young blonde woman face down on the roadside, convulsing. Emergency services were called immediately, and she was rushed to the hospital. Doctors initially concluded she had been the victim of a hit-and-run collision. By the next day, the unidentified woman remained in intensive care. She had suffered a closed head injury and was placed on medication to reduce brain swelling. That afternoon, an older man arrived, introducing himself as Clarence Marcus Hughes, claiming he was her husband. He said they lived in Tulsa, several hours away, and that his wife, whom he called Tanya, worked as a dancer, but Clarence's demeanor immediately raised suspicions, as did the old bruises on Tanya's body, injuries clearly inflicted long before the supposed accident. Then, despite the efforts of the staff, Tanya passed away on April 30, just days before her 21st birthday. Friends from the dance club where she worked were saddened by her death. They reached out to who they thought was her mother to express their sympathy. However, the woman revealed a shocking truth. Her biological daughter had died 20 years ago, at 18 months old, and she'd never had other children. Everyone was baffled by this information. Tanya's co-workers knew her only as a bright young woman who read constantly and dreamed of going to school. Her husband, Clarence, was controlling and strict, keeping both her and their son, Michael Anthony Hughes, under tight watch. He refused to let Tanya take the boy out alone. People frequently noticed the bruises on her body. Whenever asked, she blamed clumsiness, a fall here, a bump there, excuses that grew less believable each time. Many suspected Clarence was abusing her, though Tanya always denied it. Only a few close friends knew she desperately wanted to escape him but feared for her son's safety. In that context, when she died, suspicions immediately shifted toward Clarence. Authorities questioned whether such a controlling man was fit to care for a 2-year-old. On May 1, 1990, Child Protective Services took Michael into emergency custody, placing him temporarily with foster parents Merle and Ernest Bean. The Beans immediately noticed disturbing behavior. The little boy could not tolerate being told no and would erupt into violent tantrums. He has strange habits, like drinking milk from Pepsi cans and banging his head on the floor. Despite this, they were determined to help him. They gradually changed his habits, taught him structure, and helped him learn to drink milk from a cup. Gradually, Michael became calmer and more secure. But every scheduled meeting with Clarence triggered a dramatic shift. The child would panic, hide under furniture, and cry that he didn't want to see the bad man. Although Clarence had been granted supervised visitation while attempting to regain custody, each interaction made the Beans more uneasy. Eventually, they demanded a paternity test. The results were unequivocal. Clarence was not Michael's biological father. His visitation rights were revoked immediately. A huge relief for the foster family, but the danger had only begun. Within a week of Clarence losing visitation, Merle noticed cars slowing as they passed her home. Always the same vehicle. Always creeping by. As if someone were watching the house. She reported it to the police, telling them the man behind the wheel looked exactly like Clarence. Officers ran the plate. It was registered to him. Even though this confirmation was worrying, her concerns were ignored, and no one questioned the man who was unwilling to accept losing access to the boy. On September 12, 1994, after more than 4 years in the care of Merle and Ernest Bean, and just as they was nearing full legal custody, an event occurred. At the time, 6-year-old Michael Anthony Hughes was a first grader at Choctaw Elementary School in Choctaw, Oklahoma. That morning, a man identifying himself as Clarence Hughes walked into the school, armed with a gun. He confronted the principal, James Davis, pointed a gun at him, and threatened to kill him at any resistance. He forced the principal to remove Michael from the classroom. The three left the school using James's pickup truck. Clarence drove them to a remote wooded area outside of town, where he handcuffed James to a tree and wrapped his mouth, face, in duct tape. Then he fled with Michael in a stolen vehicle. James was found approximately 4 hours later by passers-by who alerted law enforcement. The FBI immediately launched a federal kidnapping investigation, focusing on Clarence Hughes, the man who insisted he was Michael's father. But investigators soon uncovered something alarming. After the death of his wife, Tanya, Clarence had applied for Social Security benefits using a number belonging to a man named Franklin Delano Floyd. Agents discovered that over the years, this man had used multiple aliases, including Trenton Davis, Warren Marshall, and now Clarence Marcus Hughes. His criminal history was extensive and violent. In 1962, Floyd had kidnapped a 4-year-old girl in Georgia, taken her into the woods, and abused her. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. Later that year, he was transferred to a Georgia State hospital for psychiatric evaluation. In early 1963, while being transported for a medical appointment, he escaped custody, fled to Macon, and robbed a bank before being recaptured. Floyd was paroled in 1972. But just months later, in early 1973, he again attacked a woman and attempted to assault her. She managed to escape. Floyd was arrested but made bail, and by June he had disappeared. A warrant was issued, but despite an active search, he remained a fugitive for over 2 decades, now, with a kidnapped child in his hands. The urgency to find him skyrocketed. Investigators also began to re-examine the suspicious death of the woman Floyd had been living with, Tanya. Although her autopsy listed her injuries as caused by a hit-and-run accident, agents now suspected she might have been fleeing Floyd, and that he had murdered her. As part of the public appeal for leads, media outlets began broadcasting Tanya's photo across the country. A few days later, a woman named Jenny Fisher contacted the FBI. She claimed she recognized the woman in the broadcasts, her best friend from high school in Forest Park, Georgia. The woman's name wasn't Tanya Hughes at all. She was Suzanne Marie Savakis, also known as Sharon, and the man calling himself her husband was actually her stepfather. Known to Jenny by the name Warren Marshall, Jenny described Sharon as a brilliant, kind, outgoing girl, a top reserve officers training corps student, a science club member, and part of the gifted program. Sharon had earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech and dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer. But one day, Sharon called Jenny sobbing. She was pregnant. She said the child's father demanded she give up the baby and had forbidden her from going to college. Jenny remembered Warren as a frightening controlling presence. Someone who openly hit Sharon even when others were watching. Sharon always said her mother died in a car accident when she was in 2nd grade. Jenny also revealed other deeply disturbing details. Once, when visiting Sharon's home, she noticed a drawer full of lingerie, items no teenage girl living without a mother would have bought herself. Sharon admitted quietly that her father bought them for her. Jenny didn't fully understand the implications at the time. But now, with the knowledge of Franklin Delano, Floyd's identity and history, the horrifying truth snapped into place. Jenny had slept over at the Marshall's house, but only once. She noticed that Sharon's room had a curtain instead of a door. As they were getting ready for bed in their pajamas, the father ran into the room with a gun and ordered the classmate to lie down on the floor and put a pillow over her head. At gunpoint, he abused his daughter, Sharon. The next morning, Sharon explained that this was a common occurrence in their household. Jenny was so frightened that she never returned to the house and, until then, hadn't told anyone about the sleepover. Investigators now began gathering information about Sharon's life history. It was known that she was born on September 6, 1969. However, Franklin Delano Floyd was incarcerated during this period, ruling out the possibility that he was Sharon's biological father. Given that the perpetrator had previously kidnapped a child, it was assumed he had abducted Sharon at a young age. This meant she had been under his care for at least 15 years before her death. Floyd was still on the run. FBI agents suggested he might return to the state where he obtained his driver's license to renew it. It worked. Floyd was soon spotted in Louisville, Kentucky. On November 10, 1994, FBI agents went to his address. The 51-year-old suspect was located, surrounded, and detained. However, Michael was not with him. Neighbors stated they had never seen any children around him. When detectives asked him about the boy's whereabouts, he replied that Michael was alive, had been left with a wealthy man who was looking after him, and that he would be fine. Of course, this was considered a lie, especially since he couldn't even name the guardian. No one believed the child was still alive. It was clear that winning a murder case without a body would be very difficult. The search continued. This dangerous repeat offender urgently needed to be locked up and isolated from society. Franklin Delano Floyd was charged with kidnapping, possession of a firearm, car theft, and a long list of other crimes. The school principal, James Davis, testified at the trial, provided incriminating testimony against Floyd. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 52 years in prison without parole. Agents discovered that the principal's pickup truck had been found abandoned in Texas a month after Michael's abduction. In 1995, a mechanic from Kansas purchased the car at auction, began repairing it. He disassembled the car and found a large envelope hidden between the body and the top of the gas tank. Inside were 97 shocking photographs of girls, children, and women in explicit poses, including one of Sharon at approximately 4 or 5 years old. There was also an image of an unidentified young woman who had sustained such severe injuries that investigators presumed her dead. However, her identity remained unknown. Most of the women in these images had distinct tan lines. It was assumed they all lived in warm, sunny areas. On March 29, 1995, a road crew discovered skeletal human remains in Pinellas County, Florida. A 4-day search recovered 90% of the skeleton, a breast implant, clothing, and jewelry. The deceased could not be identified initially. However, it was obvious she was the victim of a violent crime. As her skull was fractured, there were 2 bullet holes in the back of her head. A year after the remains were discovered, the FBI provided investigators with an image of the unidentified woman from Lloyd's photos. Examining the photo, they noticed a shirt wrapped around her neck that matched an item of clothing found with the skeletal remains. Dental records then allowed them to identify the victim as Cheryl Ann Camesso, who had disappeared in 1989. Investigators discovered that before her disappearance, Cheryl worked as a dancer at a club in Tampa. Her colleagues and acquaintances revealed that she was a close friend of Sharon and spent a lot of time with Sharon and her father, Warren. Everyone who knew Warren warned Cheryl to stay away from him. Cheryl was aware of rumors about Warren and Sharon's relationship, but she didn't confirm them until much later. One of the dancers from the club, a woman named Heather Lane, agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. She recalled an unsettling incident from 1988, when the dancers were hired to perform at a private party. Everyone understood that no intimate contact was allowed. But that night, Heather saw Sharon quietly offering intimate services for $50. Alarmed, she pulled Sharon aside. Sharon admitted her father had ordered her to do it, that he needed the money, and that he had even bought her condoms beforehand. Heather had long heard disturbing rumors about the Marshalls, but seeing this with her own eyes confirmed her worst fears. She was horrified and deeply shaken. Not long after, Sharon became pregnant and later gave birth to Michael. Motherhood transformed her. She adored the baby and often told close friends that having Michael was the greatest blessing of her life. Yet she never revealed who the child's father was. One night in 1989, Heather saw Warren in his pickup truck outside the club, shouting aggressively at Cheryl Ann Camesso. The two were in a heated argument, and Warren openly threatened to kill her. Heather considered intervening, but Warren warned he would run her over if she didn't walk away. Cheryl eventually climbed into his truck. She vanished soon after. Cheryl was only 18 years old when she disappeared in April 1989. Weeks later, her bright red Corvette was found abandoned near Brandon, Florida. The search turned up nothing. Shortly after Cheryl's disappearance, Sharon and Warren abruptly fled Tampa. A neighbor later reported watching their trailer explode soon after they left. Investigators eventually concluded they had set fire to the trailer to destroy evidence after Cheryl's murder, which authorities believed was committed by Warren. Soon, both changed their names. Sharon began calling herself Tanya, and Warren adopted the identity Clarence Marcus Hughes. Investigators would later learn the names were pulled from gravestones the pair had seen in Alabama. To further complicate things, the two stopped in Louisiana and legally married, allowing Sharon, now Tonya, to take the surname Hughes. In 2001, while Floyd was awaiting trial for the murder of Camesso, Judge Nancy Lay ruled that he was incompetent to stand trial and ordered him to undergo an additional psychiatric evaluation. Floyd challenged the evaluation, asserting that he was competent. A few months later, the judge reversed the earlier ruling and ordered Floyd to stand trial. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. In 2002, journalist Matt Birkbeck stumbled upon a missing persons photograph of a young girl sitting on the lap of a man believed to be her father. Instantly, Matt recognized her as Sharon, Suzanne Marie Savakis. Shocked by the tragic complexity of her life, he decided to investigate further. Wanting answers, he requested an interview with Franklin Delano Floyd in prison. When they met, Floyd seemed eager to tell his own version of events. He claimed he was born in 1943, raised in an orphanage after his father died, and abused throughout his childhood. He denied all wrongdoing, insisting Sharon had always stayed with him willingly and that he had left Michael with a wealthy man who would care for him. Matt didn't believe a word of it, but the interview became material for his first book in 2004. Still, many crucial questions remained unanswered. To Matt, one truth was obvious: Floyd was deeply disturbed. His second book, published in 2008, brought renewed public attention to the case. Online communities began to speculate about Sharon's origins, who she really was, and from whom she might have been stolen. Then came a turning point. Back in 2005, Matt had received a letter from a young woman asking whether her DNA could help identify Sharon. Her name was Megan Dufresne, and she was Sharon's biological daughter. Megan had been adopted at birth. Only in high school did she stumble across Matt's book and begin to suspect the horrifying truth about her mother's past. The more she learned, the more devastated and enraged she became. Everything Sharon had suffered, kidnapping, abuse, isolation, had shaped the life of a mother Megan never got to know. For most of her life, Megan believed her biological mother had died in a car accident. Only later did she learn the truth. In 1989, Tanya gave birth to a daughter while living in New Orleans. The daughter was put up for adoption. Her name was Megan. When Megan took a DNA test in 2010 hoping to find relatives, investigators made a startling discovery. Her biological mother had given birth at least 3 times. The first child was born while Sharon was still in high school, but nothing was known about his fate. Then came Michael in 1988, and finally Megan in 1989. The identities of all 3 fathers remain unknown. Some believe Sharon may have had a boyfriend in school, but many also suspected Floyd himself might be the father, though DNA testing proved Michael was not biologically related to him. In 2011, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children joined the investigation. Working alongside an FBI agent, they arranged a meeting with Franklin Delano Floyd in hopes of finally learning the truth about the children. But Floyd was a pathological liar. Getting reliable information from him seemed almost impossible. In 2014, 2 FBI agents visited Floyd in prison. They began by attempting to identify Sharon, but he rambled, misidentified them as lawyers, and complained endlessly. When they revealed they were with the FBI, he suddenly changed course, insisting he wanted Michael's case closed. Then, in a jarring emotional shift, Floyd began to cry, abruptly stopped, and claimed he had shot the boy twice in the back of the head to end his suffering. According to Floyd, he had kidnapped Michael to raise him as his own. But the child became uncontrollable the very day of the abduction. Instead of returning him, Floyd said he killed him near the Oklahoma-Texas border. Merle and Ernest Bean, the couple who had cared for Michael for 4 years and considered him their son, were devastated. Searches were conducted in March 2015 around the area Floyd described, but the land was vast, and wild boars, known to consume bone, roamed the region. Investigators hoped to find shell casings or clothing, but nothing was recovered. With no remains found, detectives turned their attention back to the truth behind Sharon's identity. During further questioning, Floyd launched into a bizarre monologue about being the most handsome bus driver in North Carolina, claiming that was how he met a woman named Sandra Frances Brandenburg in 1974. At the time, Sandy was a single mother of 4 children in a desperate situation. Floyd said he introduced himself as Brandon Williams, one of many aliases he used. According to his story, Sharon was actually Suzanne Marie Savakis, Sandra Frances Brandenburg's missing eldest daughter. Agents began verifying this claim nearly 40 years after the abduction. Both Sandra and her ex-husband, Clifford Ray Savakis, were still alive and able to provide crucial details. Suzanne had been born in Livonia, Michigan, on September 6, 1969. Her father, Clifford, was drafted into the Vietnam War and first met his daughter when she was 6 months old. When he returned home, he and Sandra eventually separated. Sandra remarried and raised her children in a trailer. Struggling with poverty for years, their already difficult life worsened when a tornado destroyed their home, leaving Sandra traumatized and overwhelmed. When she sought assistance from social services, she was informed she risked losing custody of her children. Clifford, only 23 at the time, tried to help, but he too was facing financial hardship. So when Sandra met Brandon Williams, he appeared to be a blessing, at least at first. Initially, he was supportive and even helped her retain custody of her children. But shortly after they married, his behavior turned dark. He who had once seemed protective became paranoid and violent. He would grab a knife and stalk Sandra through the house, insisting she could never leave him, even when there was no hint of separation, and within months, he kidnapped her children, changing their lives forever. Continued to struggle financially. One day, in desperation, Sandra used a counterfeit check to buy groceries. She was arrested and spent a month in jail. While she was incarcerated, her children remained in the custody of her husband. But when Sandy was released, she returned home to find the house empty. Panicked, she contacted the police. After learning the children had been taken by their stepfather, officers told her they couldn't intervene because, in the eyes of the law, the man had parental rights. A long search eventually led authorities to two of the missing girls, Allison and Amy, who had been left at a local church. But Suzanne and Philip were gone. Their whereabouts remained a mystery for decades. Floyd had fled Texas with Suzanne, first taking her to Oklahoma. When she entered elementary school there, she was enrolled under her real name. 9 years later, they moved again, this time to Georgia, where she became known as Sharon or Suzanne Marshall. It wasn't until June 3, 2017, that her tombstone was finally corrected to reflect her true identity, Suzanne Marie Savakis. Years later, after becoming a mother herself, Sharon's daughter, Megan Dufresne, named her firstborn son Michael, honoring the half-brother she never got to meet. Then, on March 7, 2019, author Matt Birkbeck received a message from a man in North Carolina named Stevie. Stevie explained that after his father's death, his mother confessed the truth about his past. She showed him documents revealing that his real name was Philip Brandenburg. Stevie's adoptive mother told him that decades earlier, a nervous young woman named Sandra had appeared at her home, holding a little boy. Sandra said she was leaving town with her new husband and her other children, and could not care for him. In the distance, the woman remembered seeing a tense, quiet man, Franklin Delano Floyd, watching. In February 2020, a DNA test confirmed what investigators had long suspected. Stevie is Philip Brandenburg, Sandra's biological son and Suzanne's younger brother. As for Franklin Delano Floyd, he lived far longer than many believed he deserved. On January 23, 2023, at the age of 79, he died of natural causes at the Ryford Correctional Facility in Florida, never having faced the death penalty. To this day, he is believed to have been responsible for the deaths of Suzanne, Michael, and possibly other unknown victims. Michael's body has never been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Krista Waninger. On May 2, 1963, a tragic event occurred on Via Emilia in Rome when police were called to an apartment building after witnesses reported finding an injured girl. 2 police officers arrived at the apartment building and went up to the 4th floor. In the hallway between apartments 14 and 15, they discovered a blonde woman in a blue coat lying unconscious in a large pool of blood, her eyes wide with horror. Several people had gathered around her, including a shocked janitor and a young neighbor who worked at a medical center. The neighbor checked the victim's pulse, performed CPR, and did everything she could to keep the girl alive until an ambulance arrived. One of the neighbors called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. The girl was dead. The victim was identified as Krista Waninger, 23. She had come to Rome in search of success and fame, but tragically, she had been fatally stabbed 7 times. The police immediately began questioning neighbors and witnesses to piece together what had happened. However, no one had witnessed the attack, not even the residents of apartments 14 and 15. The police knocked on the doors of both apartments and Gerda Hodap came out. When asked by the police about Krista, she stated that they were friends. They had planned to meet, but Krista was attacked and stabbed just steps away from Gerda's apartment. The attack occurred at 2:50 p.m., and Gerda claimed that she had been taking a nap and had not heard anything unusual. While Krista was brutally murdered behind closed doors, it caused quite a commotion on their floor. Her explanation seemed implausible. The doorman informed the police that Krista did not live in the building. They knew each other because the victim frequently visited Gerda's apartment. The murder had occurred nearby. After investigating a few blocks away, the police went to Krista's house, which appeared to be quite empty. Meanwhile, Gerda was taken to the police station for questioning while the authorities carefully examined the crime scene. Under the doorknob of Gerda's apartment, the police discovered a bloody handprint, indicating that Krista had tried to call for help. The building's doorman recalled that when he heard a woman scream, he quickly ran up the stairs. On his way, he encountered a strange man coming down who seemed startled to see him. At first, the doorman did not pay much attention to the strange man. However, he later suspected that there was a connection between this man and the case. When the doorman arrived at the scene, several residents from nearby apartments had gathered. They found Krista lying in a large pool of blood, her breathing irregular and her condition deteriorating. The witnesses were all in a state of panic and did not know how to help. Gerda, who was present at the police station, was willing to share any information she had about her friend Krista. She seemed genuinely concerned about the attack and did not understand why anyone would want to harm Krista. They had been friends for a long time, supporting each other in their modeling and acting careers. Gerda said that Krista was supposed to arrive at around 3 p.m., but she had been feeling unwell that day and had taken sleeping pills, which caused her to miss the attack. Although Gerda spoke about her sleep problems, she could not remember the name of the pills she had taken or explain why she had not canceled her meeting with Krista despite having gone to bed. The police found Gerda's story suspicious. Krista had suffered serious injuries, including 7 stab wounds, 3 of which were in the chest. The attacker had used a large knife to assault Krista, leaving her unable to be saved. In addition, Krista had several defensive wounds on her arms. The forensic expert observed that all of the wounds appeared to have been inflicted from above, indicating that the attacker was tall. In interviews with witnesses, it was confirmed that a man, described as unknown, had fled the scene shortly before the police arrived. Several people, including the concierge, reported seeing a tall man in a blue jacket leaving the building shortly after the attack. Using the descriptions of the witnesses, a composite sketch was created and subsequently published in newspapers and broadcast on television. The police reconstructed the timeline of events, determining that Krista left her apartment at approximately 2 p.m. and planned to return at 5 p.m. Before the appointment, she had visited a friend. About 30 minutes later, she arrived at Gerda's house, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and was attacked on the stairs. It is believed that the attacker knew Krista and was waiting for her. Police initially suspected her friend Gerda because of her strange behavior during the attack. A neighbor reported that she had called Gerda's apartment and heard someone moving around behind the door, but no one answered, perhaps out of fear. The police suspected that Gerda was withholding information. Gerda insisted that no one rang the doorbell until the police arrived and claimed that she had heard nothing until the police knocked. Krista's murder in broad daylight in central Rome caused a media frenzy. The police hoped to gather useful information from the public, but the widespread attention also led to rumors spreading rapidly. The police received dozens of statements, most of which were complex, while others simply restated what was already known. They investigated all known criminals with a history of knife attacks, focusing not only on those who might be hiding in Rome, but also checking neighboring cities, although this effort was fruitless. In the midst of these events, a wave of panic spread throughout the community. People became increasingly afraid to go out, and the police station was flooded with angry calls from locals urging them to arrest the person responsible for Krista's attack. Some callers even made threats to the police, demanding action to ensure the safety of the streets. Meanwhile, Gerda maintained her innocence, calling the police's suspicion of her an insult. The police began to explore other leads, focusing especially on those close to Krista. There were many indications that the perpetrator was connected to Krista, leading the police to believe that the attack may have been motivated by jealousy or personal animosity. Therefore, they looked into the relationships Krista had formed since moving to another country. One notable individual was Krista's boyfriend. He was very jealous and possessive, with evidence suggesting that he had abused Krista on several occasions. Their relationship was tumultuous, often triggered by his unfounded suspicions that Krista was cheating on him with other men. This jealousy may have stemmed from several factors, including Krista's notebook filled with the phone numbers of men in the modeling and acting industries. Her profession required her to socialize and network with many people, and Krista frequently attended social events to promote herself and build valuable relationships, which made her boyfriend feel uncomfortable. He became jealous of every random person she interacted with, and his insecurities led him to become increasingly controlling. Every phone call from a man was viewed as a betrayal, which angered her boyfriend. This pressure caused Krista to decline movie offers and made her financially dependent on him. The police identified two suspects: Krista's boyfriend, who had both a motive and a violent streak, and her friend Gerda Hodap, who was near the scene of the murder but claimed not to have seen or heard anything. It is possible that Gerda had a motive for the murder, perhaps wanting to eliminate an attractive rival. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. Journalists constantly intervened, probing for information and asking difficult questions. The police were puzzled by the presence of a strange man in a blue jacket. Although this man appeared at the crime scene and quickly left, he coldly mentioned that there was a woman screaming on the 4th floor, without offering any help. Other witnesses grew suspicious and tried to explain the presence of this stranger. The police concluded that the case might have been carefully planned, with the man in the blue jacket acting as a distraction. However, if that were the case, the criminal would have likely stayed at the crime scene, which raised suspicions about Gerda. Meanwhile, Gerda faced constant interrogations and became a media phenomenon. Journalists pursued her, spreading rumors and portraying her as a monster. The police believed that if Gerda was not involved in the murder, she may have acted as an informant or concealed information. However, to date, there has been no concrete evidence linking her to the case. The police continue to investigate the possibility of a random attack. However, they face a shortage of resources. A search of Krista's inner circle yielded no leads. Her address book contained many phone numbers related to men and various clubs in Rome, as well as organizations connected to modeling and acting. Hundreds of contacts had accumulated over the years. Despite a thorough police investigation, each contact led to a dead end. Gerda remained under close police surveillance. They even took her to the morgue to view Krista's body and observe her reaction. The police noted her emotionless response to their questions. The interrogations were repeated several times. Gerda changed her story, claiming that the doorbell rang when Krista visited. However, the screams that followed frightened her, so she did not open the door. Gerda explained her dishonesty by saying that she felt ashamed for not helping her friend. The police believed that she was a potential accomplice to the crime, suggesting that Krista had been lured there so that her attacker could kill her. Ultimately, the police were unable to obtain a confession that would identify Gerda as the killer, and at most, she could be considered an accomplice. By reconstructing the timeline of events, the police discovered why the janitor had not noticed a strange man entering the building. He had visited the utility room several times during the day. It was a complete coincidence that he had entered just before Krista arrived at the apartment complex. This raised suspicions that the attacker knew exactly when and where Krista would arrive. Several witnesses reported seeing Krista enter the apartment complex alone, unescorted, and without anyone else accompanying her. This led the police to believe that the perpetrator had entered the apartment complex before Krista, just before she arrived. It was suspected that the perpetrator knew which floor she would go to and where to wait for her. After a while, the Krista Waninger murder case yielded no more clues. Public interest in the case also waned, as no similar attacks occurred afterward. People began to calm down, and Krista's case gradually faded into oblivion, largely because her family lived far away in another country. Despite efforts to understand the situation, it was difficult to generate significant interest in the case. Krista's mother and sister actively distributed flyers with her picture in the hope of attracting potential witnesses, but their efforts did not advance the investigation. The investigation into Krista's murder had stalled for 10 months until an anonymous witness contacted a local newspaper. Using a false name, he asked to speak to the editor. The man claimed to be the brother of Krista's killer and offered to sell information to the newspaper for a large sum of money. The journalist who took the call felt that the man's story was more than just a scam to capitalize on the tragedy. Believing that the witness might have accurate information, he decided to contact the police. The journalist carefully communicated with the man, promising to collect the necessary funds to pay him in advance by the evening. They agreed to contact him later to discuss the details. After the call, the journalist went to the police station to report the unusual conversation. The police showed interest in the case, and the journalist agreed to work with them, using special equipment to monitor the incoming call. The anonymous caller contacted the journalist at 19:05. During this call, 2 police officers listened in and recorded the conversation. They were able to locate the source of the call. Several police officers then went to the address provided, where they found a 32-year-old man using the phone booth. His name was Guido Pieri. When they saw him, the police immediately recognized that he matched the police sketch of the suspect. He was arrested and searched, and their suspicions were confirmed when they found a 30-centimeter-long knife in his jacket pocket, similar to the weapon used in the attack on Krista. The police believed they had the right suspect. Unfortunately, further examination revealed that Krista was not killed with this knife. Guido Pieri insisted from the beginning that he was only trying to profit from the story, but he was unable to provide any clear information. When the police searched his home, they found another knife, but no blood, and it could not be linked to Krista's wounds. Disturbing notes were found in Guido's home, including 5 notebooks detailing gruesome murders of women. The most alarming was the final story, which was very similar to the case of Krista Waninger. The story included specific details that had not been made public and were known only to the perpetrator, raising suspicions against Guido. Guido Pieri grew up in a family with 4 brothers and 3 sisters. From an early age, he had a strong passion for adventure painting. However, while in vocational school, he decided to drop out and start working, especially after struggling to finish 8th grade 3 times. Although he was not unintelligent, he had obvious problems with self-control. By the age of 18, he was employed as a mechanic in a construction company, maintaining a fleet of equipment. After 10 years, Guido married a much older woman. During this time, he pursued his passion for painting, dreaming of becoming an artist. In February, Guido moved to Paris to pursue this dream, but unfortunately, his efforts ended in disappointment. In his diary, he explained his feelings in detail. It was clear that Guido was a deeply creative individual with a unique perspective on life, but he struggled to manage the challenges he faced and find his own path. He lacked the courage and motivation needed to overcome these obstacles. As a result, Guido moved back to Rome, ended his marriage, and took a job as a secretary at the Institute, where he worked until he was 63. His diaries reveal a disillusioned man full of ambitions and ideas that he was unable to turn into reality. When the police questioned him about the notes they discovered during the search, Guido explained that they were ideas for a future novel, as he longed to write a book. When reviewing the notes, The police noticed many similarities to the real-life case of Krista Waninger. Details of the crime scene and descriptions of the people involved closely resembled the apartment building and surrounding area where Krista was murdered. This raised questions about whether these accounts referred to her murder, which aroused suspicions among the police. Guido led a seemingly normal life, frequenting upscale restaurants and bars. However, he remained on the police radar, having been spotted at several other violent crime scenes unrelated to Krista. Unfortunately, he did not confess or provide any evidence of his innocence. At that time, witnesses who had seen a suspicious man in a blue jacket leaving the apartment building after hearing Krista scream had not yet testified. 3 of the 4 witnesses identified him as Guido. Despite ongoing questioning and suspicion, no physical evidence was found linking him to the crime. The police decided to return all the confiscated diaries belonging to Guido, and he was released. During this time, Krista's sister pushed for the investigation to be reopened. The police reviewed all relevant information, but this lead did not yield any results. Guido remained the prime suspect, but he did not confess. Despite having no evidence to present, the police continued to investigate and put pressure on him. Surprisingly, Guido Pieri went to the police station and confessed to killing Krista Waninger. He was arrested, and it took a year before the trial began. Despite his confession, he was acquitted due to a lack of sufficient evidence. His lawyer argued that Guido had mental health problems and pointed out that he refused to confess again. By this time, he had been officially diagnosed with schizophrenia, which led the police to consider his confession unreliable. There were 2 more hearings. In both trials, Guido Pieri was found guilty, but he was released on bail due to his mental condition. Guido later changed his story, claiming that he had been at the scene of the murder by accident and denied any guilt. In addition, Guido destroyed his own notebooks, containing disturbing notes that could have been used against him. During the psychiatric evaluation, he was found to be insane. Therefore, the court could only order Guido to undergo treatment for schizophrenia. Despite his crime, he was allowed to go free without any apparent motive. For a long time, he was considered a threat to society, but there was not enough evidence to prove it. He was eventually released and deemed harmless, much to the shock of Krista's family. Sadly, Krista's relatives were never able to obtain justice or see Guido incarcerated. It was a sweltering night in Apopka, Florida. The sound of an ambulance siren woke neighbors, but no one knew what was going on. When police arrived, they found a woman sitting on her doorstep, covered in cuts and holding a blood-soaked towel against her chest. She told officers she had shot a man in self-defense. Inside the house, police discovered his body. He had been shot several times, 1 bullet piercing his heart. There was no sign of a burglary or a struggle. There were only 2 people at the scene, and one of them was dead. The story begins as a beautiful marriage between 2 colleagues, a soldier who spent time in the Iraqi desert and a smart, caring programmer. They shared deep love and believed nothing could ever come between them. But love turned to obsession. Meetings turned to arguments, and the final night ended in gunfire. Anita Smithay said she was attacked and had no choice but to defend herself. Investigators doubted her account. Were her wounds signs of self-defense or self-inflicted? Were the 3 gunshots the result of panic or intention? This is the story of a broken love, a night of terror, and a confession that still divides public opinion. Was it self-defense or murder? Anita Smithay lived in Apopka, Florida, USA, and had 2 children from her first marriage. She met her second husband, Robert Klein. When they both worked for the same company, Robert in sales, and Anita as a programmer. Robert was a medic who served in Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. He was raising 2 young children after his first wife, Deborah, died of a heart attack in 2003. His wife's death devastated him, and Anita became his best friend, helping him through the difficult time. While working together, they discovered many similarities, especially in their views on raising children. During Anita's difficult divorce in 2004, Robert offered her emotional support. Anita eventually gained full custody of her children. Their friendship gradually turned into love. Since Anita was officially single, their relationship deepened. They dated for a while and married in May 2007. The first years of their marriage were quite happy. But gradually the conflicts increased. After 3 years of marriage, they broke up and lived apart for about 3 months. Even so, their feelings for each other persisted, and they started dating again, though they decided not to remarry. Anita often told friends she couldn't let go of Robert, as they remained strongly drawn to each other. Their meetings, however, frequently ended in arguments and frustration. They eventually decided to limit physical intimacy to reduce tension. But this approach failed to improve things. On the night of May 4, 2010, police received a call from a distressed woman claiming she had shot her ex-husband in self-defense. When officers arrived, they found Anita Smith covered in bruises and cuts. She was sitting at the entrance of her home around 2 a.m., holding a blood-soaked towel against her chest and waiting for help. Her injuries included a forehead bruise, a chipped tooth, cuts on her neck and face, and split lips. Inside the house, Robert's body was found. He had multiple gunshot wounds, one of which had struck his heart and proved fatal. At 4:38 a.m., an officer visited Anita in the hospital to question her. While the incident was initially considered self-defense, further investigation was needed to confirm the details. Although still in shock, Anita agreed to talk. She said Robert had come to spend the evening with her, offering her a drink, and the two had been intimate. They had agreed he would leave afterward, but he stayed late. When Anita asked him to go home, fearing their night would again end in conflict, he refused. An argument broke out, likely intensified by alcohol. Robert allegedly attacked her, pushing her onto the bed and pinning her down. He demanded they get back together. Anita tried to calm him and asked him to leave, but he refused. Although they continued meeting, she did not want to remarry him. In a fit of rage, he allegedly stabbed her several times and then held a knife to her throat. She resisted and tried to calm him down, reminding him that the police would hold him responsible if she died. Robert did not seem to mind. He insisted that the detectives would be unable to prove anything because he had a solid alibi. He said he left after the children were asleep, and they could confirm that he was home all night. The argument escalated. When Anita refused to yield and insisted on ending their relationship, Robert slapped her again. The blow caused her to lose a tooth and tear her lip. Still not satisfied, Robert tries to abuse Anita. In panic, she grabbed the pistol she kept in her nightstand and shot him. On the surface, it looked like a typical case of self-defense, but many details were unclear. Anita was questioned 2 hours after the incident, and due to shock, her memory of the event seemed uncertain. The police postponed further questioning until she had calmed down. Meanwhile, the forensic team examined the scene and quickly discovered many irregularities. Anita's statement was inconsistent in many places. The next morning, when asked again, she said that the confusion was due to shock. But in her account, several details had changed. Although she still claimed self-defense, she seemed to be trying to rearrange the facts in her favor. Veteran detectives had seen similar behavior when an offender tries to appear as the victim. Anita reiterated that she was assaulted by Robert but expanded her testimony to include more information about their relationship. She said they had separated 3 months earlier because of Robert's hostile and aggressive behavior. According to her, Robert was also under financial stress. He had missed mortgage payments for nearly a year and unsuccessfully applied for a Department of Defense assistance program. Anita claimed these struggles fueled his anger, causing him to lash out, even at the children. She said he often belittled them and demanded they leave the house he saw as solely his. Despite both contributing equally during their marriage, Robert wanted complete ownership of the property, while Anita was seeking fair compensation. Her children from a previous marriage confirmed that Robert had been aggressive toward their mother, though they said they didn't feel emotionally pressured themselves. Robert's children, however, saw things differently. They said Anita provoked most of the conflicts. Robert's friends also denied he was aggressive, believing their split stemmed from personality clashes. Anita was described as lively and emotional, while Robert was seen as a calm, gentle giant. He was a large, athletic man but considered kind-hearted. Text message analysis showed that Robert often sent Anita loving words and expressed his desire to mend the relationship. An acquaintance of Anita said she had complained about Robert's controlling tendencies. However, Anita had never reported domestic violence to the police. She said the first serious argument took place just before they broke up. From then on, Robert was often angry, threw things, punched walls, and screamed incessantly. When asked why she hadn't called the authorities, Anita said she was too afraid. She claimed Robert's outbursts terrified her and that he once threatened her 13-year-old son, who tried to call emergency services. The boy was crying and scared, but Robert continued to torment them. Anita said she was afraid she wouldn't have enough time to call the police, so she thought it best to stay quiet. They left once Robert calmed down. Anita later decided not to report the incident because Robert begged her to keep it quiet. He was an insurance agent, and if he were prosecuted, he could lose his license, his job, and his income. What's noteworthy is that later conversations with Anita's children showed that they were not greatly affected. They had never been harmed by Robert. So some people believed that Anita was trying to pin the blame on him as a way to prove that she was the victim. After several serious arguments, the two divorced, but then started dating again. It was unclear who initiated the reunion. Anita insisted that Robert begged her to take him back, apologized repeatedly, and even behaved like a stalker. Robert's relatives, however, claimed it was Anita who wanted to rekindle the relationship. After moving out with her children, Anita allowed Robert to visit her home regularly. He came by weekly, sometimes several times a week. He seemed to be interested only in the physical. Although Anita didn't object, he continued to be violent. It all happened again on May 3 and 4, the day of the tragedy. While they argued, Anita tried to shoo him away, but he ignored her. A knife suddenly appeared in his hand, the handle wrapped in a napkin. Anita realized he was serious, because he held the knife in a way that would not leave fingerprints. Instead of calming down, Robert put a knife to her throat and abused her. In describing the attack, Anita mentioned details that investigators found suspicious, including his use of the napkin and the way their bodies were positioned. She said she lay beneath him on the bed as he held the knife to her throat. When Robert became distracted while reaching for lubricant, Anita retrieved a pistol from the top drawer of her nightstand and quietly placed it under his pillow. He didn't notice. After the assault ended, she pressed the pistol to his chest. Robert didn't resist. Instead, he collapsed onto her with his full weight, which she could not support. As she struggled under him, the gun discharged. Anita insisted the shooting was accidental. She claimed she had aimed at his stomach and that the weapon shifted when Robert tried to push it away. The bullet hit his heart, and he died instantly. Police began to suspect that it was not entirely self-defense. They reconstructed the scene, analyzed the location of the body and objects, and found many inconsistencies in Anita's story. They began to suspect that Anita might have inflicted her own knife wounds to make her account appear more credible. They found a small folding knife next to the bed where the shooting occurred. Anita's eldest son later claimed it was his own, which was odd, since his room was far from his mother's. And Anita had never mentioned that Robert had been there. Anita's eldest son also had no reason to leave a knife in his mother's room. Investigators reasoned that if Robert had really planned to harm Anita, he would have used a more accessible weapon, perhaps something from the kitchen or one of his own. Using her son's folding knife seemed improbable. The next issue in dispute was how many shots were actually fired. Although Anita claimed there had only been one, a ballistics analysis showed that 3 shots had been fired, 2 of which she never mentioned. It was also unclear when those 2 additional shots occurred. Notably, one of the bullets was blank and was determined to be the first shot. Anita said she did not remember the details because she was frightened and in shock. Despite this, she remembered other aspects of the event clearly, making investigators doubt her explanation. They began to suspect she was adjusting her story to fit a self-defense claim. Evidence, while circumstantial, started to suggest premeditation. After the first attempt to shoot failed, Anita pulled the trigger several more times. She claimed she did this because Robert became violent once he realized she was about to shoot him. Anita said she had acted out of fear during the struggle and had no choice but to defend herself. Police, however, were already skeptical. Even the detectives couldn't agree on how to interpret the inconsistencies in her story. Anita's version conflicted with the ballistics results, raising serious doubts. Another suspicious detail was the jar of coconut oil. Anita said the oil bottle was always on the nightstand because they often used it during intimacy. But when detectives arrived at the scene, they found the jar in the bathroom instead. Nobody could explain how it got there. Anita insisted she hadn't moved it, saying she went straight to a neighbor's house after the shooting. However, as questioning continued, she became more anxious, and her story began to shift. At first, the changes were minor, but over several hours, her account altered significantly. She eventually admitted that Robert hadn't reached for the oil on the nightstand. He had gone into the bathroom. During that time, she hid the gun under his pillow. Detectives found this detail highly suspicious. Anita had been presenting herself as the victim, but this new version made her look like a calculated killer. If there had been no real threat, why use a gun at all? The incident involving the knife also raised suspicions. There was no evidence that Robert brought the knife into Anita's son's bathroom. Detectives believe she wrapped the knife handle in a napkin to avoid fingerprints. The napkin was never found, making it impossible to determine whose DNA had been on it. Forensic experts examined both Robert's body and Anita's injuries. Their analysis suggested Anita had used her son's knife to make several shallow cuts on herself, staging them to appear as defensive wounds. In truth, there was no sign that Robert had attacked her. The conclusion is that she wanted Robert dead. Although her motives remain unclear, Anita explained that the knife had been bought for her eldest son in October for airsoft practice. But later, she and Robert decided it was too dangerous for a 13-year-old and banned him from using it. When detectives pointed out inconsistencies about the knife, Anita again changed her story. Partial fingerprints found on the handle matched Anita's, while none belonged to Robert. Their placement suggested she had simply held the knife normally, not in the course of a struggle. Despite this, Anita later claimed she had grabbed the knife during the fight, which could explain her prints. When experts examined the cuts on her body and compared them to her description of the struggle, they concluded the wounds could not have been inflicted by another person. The direction and position of each cut clearly indicated they were self-inflicted. Still, Anita kept insisting they were not. However, until the last minute, the detectives did not reveal the full truth they had discovered during their search of the house to Anita. They had discovered that her account of a violent struggle on the bed was false. The bed linen showed no trace of blood from either Anita or Robert. Instead, blood was found near the bedside table, on the carpet, and on Anita herself. The analysis shows that Robert was shot while standing, from a distance farther than that of direct contact in a struggle. It appeared that he entered the room and was almost immediately shot. When confronted, Anita's story unraveled. She admitted lying about the struggle on the bed. Robert had never held her down. She claimed that the struggle actually happened near the bed, involving a knife. Later, Anita confessed that she had inflicted wounds on herself. Fearing the police would not believe her claim of self-defense, Anita insisted she hadn't meant to kill Robert and only lied because she thought no one would believe her. She said her greatest fear was losing her children and going to prison. However, investigators felt this was a plea for sympathy. They no longer believed her self-defense claim and began to look for evidence of premeditation. The autopsy showed that Robert had been shot twice, once in the abdomen and once in the heart, the latter being fatal. Detectives concluded it was unlikely to be accidental. They suspected Anita wanted to get rid of Robert, who she described as controlling or clingy. But the lack of any police reports or domestic violence complaints made her claims doubtful. The excuse of losing her insurance license was absurd given the threat to her life. After several interrogations, detectives reconstructed the entire course of events, which Anita eventually admitted. Most of her earlier claims were dismissed. She maintained only that Robert was cruel and aggressive, but his family strongly denied this, saying she was tarnishing his memory. No one in Robert's family or friends confirmed that he had ever been violent. He had no criminal record, apart from minor traffic violations. Eventually, Anita Smithy was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Because there wasn't enough evidence to prove premeditation, she was released on bail after her father sold his farm to cover the bond. While incarcerated, she befriended an inmate named Kim, who was also accused of killing her husband and awaiting trial. Kim had received a 40-year sentence in 2009 and worried that Anita might face the same fate. The two women stayed in contact as Anita's case proceeded. Prosecutors spent months gathering new evidence and building their argument. Anita's trial for Robert Klein's death began in 2016, with both their families and friends in attendance. The case divided opinions. Some saw Anita as a victim of long-term abuse, while others demanded justice for Robert. During the trial, prosecutors revealed what they believed was the real motive. Robert had stopped paying his share of the mortgage, putting Anita at risk of losing her home. For years, she had been covering half the payments on her own. If the house was lost, she would lose everything. According to investigators, Robert refused to give her ownership, believing he could resolve his financial troubles, but evidence suggested otherwise. They concluded that the murder and the fabricated self-defense claim were part of a plan for Anita to keep the house and become its sole owner. Financially, she was in a better position and capable of paying off the debts Robert had left behind. At trial, several witnesses testified that Anita was the one who initiated the family disputes. They also heard her raise her voice and show anger toward Robert. The investigation also revealed that she did not have a license to carry a firearm. Consequently, in addition to the second-degree murder charge, she faced charges for the illegal purchase, possession, and use of a firearm. Although the defense attorney tried to portray Anita as a victim, the jury still found her guilty. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 70% of her sentence. Just 30 days later, Anita successfully appealed. This came after she changed attorneys. The first trial was found to be unfair due to numerous errors, and Anita was not given adequate legal assistance. The Court of Appeal concluded that her former lawyer did not meet the constitutional standard of effective assistance. Another important factor was the misconduct of the detectives during the interrogation. In the recording later released, Anita stated that she wanted to speak to a lawyer, but the detectives continued to question her, violating her right to silence. The appeals court found that Anita's statement admitting she had inflicted her own wounds with a knife was coerced under pressure from the detective. During the retrial, the jury encountered conflicting evidence and testimony, which made reaching a verdict difficult. Her new attorney managed to keep some sensitive information confidential, which strengthened her defense. By 2021, Anita had served a little over 6 years in prison. She pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder, was acquitted, and released that same year. However, she received a 10-year probation sentence. Additionally, Anita was ordered to pay $41,000 in court costs and restitution to Robert's family. Her acquittal was largely due to several strategic mistakes made by the prosecution, investigators, and the previous court. Errors that her new lawyer effectively used to her advantage. Notably, Kim also asserted that Anita was wrongly convicted and always believed in her innocence. Kim and Anita remain in contact. Kim told reporters she had long awaited Anita's release, believed in her innocence, and had even considered helping her escape. Anita claims that both women were victims of domestic violence and government mistreatment. She has attempted to become an activist for individuals in similar situations but has seen little success. In one interview, Anita proposed partnering with Kim to create a law firm dedicated to defending people facing comparable cases. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Amy Mullis. Love triangles are among the most common causes of domestic crimes. This is a story about the Mullis family's farm in Ulville, Iowa, USA, a quiet and peaceful place with a close-knit community. On November 10, 2018, the younger Mullis children stayed home while their parents worked with their oldest son, Tristan, in one of the farm's pig barns. The family divided responsibilities among themselves to ensure everyone handled tasks they were best suited for. On that day, Tristan was cleaning the barn while his father, Todd Mullis, checked the electrical equipment. Tristan's mother, Amy, joined them a little later. When she entered the barn, she tripped over a bucket and nearly fell. Just a day before this incident, Amy had been experiencing health issues, including dizziness and pain. She had visited the doctor multiple times for similar problems. It seemed she hadn't fully recovered, yet she still decided to work. Noticing his wife's exhaustion, her husband suggested that she go home and rest. Todd mentioned that she could assist him later once he finished the main tasks with Tristan. Amy agreed but wanted to complete a small chore first. She intended to visit the nearby shed to retrieve a carrier for their animals, as they needed to take their cat to the veterinary clinic the following day. After Amy left, the father and son continued their work together. Eventually, Todd glanced out the window and noticed that the door of the distant shed was still open, even though Amy had been gone for quite some time. She should have returned by now with the carrier and closed the barn. Growing concerned that something might have happened, he worried that his wife might have fallen again due to her dizziness. He then asked Tristan to go outside and check what was happening. Perhaps his mother needed help. When Tristan arrived at the shed, he was shocked to see his mother with the tines of a corn rake protruding from her body. He rushed inside and realized it was critical. He immediately called for his father. Todd quickly ran to the source of the scream and recognized that he needed to act fast. He instructed his son to fetch the family pickup truck. Tristan was already skilled at driving and could navigate the property swiftly. While Tristan went for the truck, Todd attempted to help Amy and carry her out of the shed. The rake made it difficult for him to maneuver through the narrow space, forcing him to pull it out of her body. By the time Tristan arrived with the pickup truck, Todd had loaded Amy into the vehicle and quickly took the driver's seat. Tristan held his dying mother in his arms as his father called 911. The dispatcher received a call from a very agitated man who was shouting for help. Todd reported that an accident had occurred on the farm and that his wife was seriously injured. He explained to the operator that they had found her lying face down in the shed with a corn rake sticking out of her back. The corn rake had 4 straight, sharp tines designed to easily penetrate hay or piles of leaves, and unfortunately, they had pierced her flesh. While he was on the phone with the operator, Amy stopped breathing. The dispatcher instructed him to pull over and provide first aid. Following the operator's guidance, the father and son stopped their vehicle, laid Amy on the ground, alternated performing artificial respiration and chest compressions. Unfortunately, the resuscitation efforts did not have the desired effect. Todd took Amy to the emergency department, but there the doctors could only confirm the death of her. The police then called the father and son to the station to take their statements while forensic experts examined the scene. Tristan supported his father's account, which helped establish a solid alibi for Todd. Tristan firmly asserted that he had not taken his eyes off his father until he saw the rake protruding from his mother's back. He believes that a tragic accident has occurred. During the initial investigation, most of Tristan's account was corroborated. When Tristan and his father discovered Amy, she was still alive but unconscious. The police also interviewed Todd, who stated that he did not know how his wife was injured, as he was not present when it occurred. Todd speculated that she might have fallen onto a corn rake, possibly due to feeling dizzy. Although this explanation seems somewhat far-fetched, law enforcement chose to wait for the medical examiner's findings before drawing conclusions. The report arrived quickly, raising further questions. Notably, there were 6 puncture wounds from the corn rake, which was puzzling since the tool only had 4 prongs, meaning it should have left only 4 marks. The medical examiner noted that Amy had other injuries, including a bruise on her upper lip and several fresh bruises on her face. There were also similar bruises on her arms and legs, some of which appeared to be defensive wounds, suggesting that she had been in a struggle with at least one other person. There was no doubt that it was not an accident. It was clear that Amy had been attacked. Detectives began investigating the murder, and after new developments emerged, forensic experts returned to the barn to closely examine the scene and validate the coroner's suspicions. During the initial examination right after the incident, it was already dark, so the detectives needed to conduct a thorough inspection this time. Forensic scientists found several bloodstains in the shed, where Tristan had discovered his injured mother. There were small splatters on the chemical bags along the walls, on the floor, and on all nearby surfaces. The scene indicated a violent attack, as the blood had spread widely. This suggested that Amy could not have fallen onto the corn rake by herself, as her husband had claimed. She had been beaten with a farming tool, receiving 2 or 3 blows. The area where the crime occurred had been overall very peaceful. In the last 10 years, this was only the 4th murder. For this reason, law enforcement officials decided to seek assistance from state authorities, who had much more experience in solving such cases. Investigators spoke with the neighbors of the Mallas family, who revealed that their marriage had long been troubled. Their spouses were experiencing difficulties, frequently argued, even though the husband was known to be calm and non-confrontational. This raised suspicions among the police, leading them to believe that Todd not be telling the truth. He had a motive, making him the primary suspect in the case. Consequently, the police began to examine him more closely. The tragic loss of Amy, a kind and vibrant person, shocked the local community. Many were surprised that a mother of 3 could find herself in such a deadly situation. Detectives began investigating the couple's personal life to find a possible motive for the murder. 5 years earlier, Amy had cheated on Todd, which shattered his trust in her. This betrayal led to a decline in their once-ideal relationship. However, they worked through their issues, decided to try to save their marriage for the sake of their children. They attended counseling with a family psychologist. Amy left her nursing job at the hospital to spend more time with her family, help on the farm, where she took care of the plants and animals and managed the family's finances. She told her friends that she quit her job at Todd's urging to avoid new temptations. Meanwhile, Todd also made an effort to spend more time with Amy and their children. Despite these efforts, the psychologist observed that Todd could never fully regain his trust in Amy. Amy spent all her time on the farm, where Todd was usually present both day and night. As a result, Todd's behavior became much more controlling than it had been before. Later, Amy expressed her frustration, saying that her husband was practically monitoring her. They seemed to have reached an agreement about how they spent their time together, which Todd believed was a way to rebuild trust in their relationship. However, this situation became a major issue for Amy. She jokingly referred to herself as her husband's prisoner. she shared with her close friends. Todd even restricted Amy's friendships, deciding who she could communicate with and what interests she could pursue. One of the friends he allowed, Patricia Christopherson, noted that since 2018, Amy had stopped feeling joy in her marriage. Patricia claimed that even a year earlier, Amy had been unhappy, and her affair was a way to escape Todd's excessive control. Others in their circle suspected that Todd was involved in the murder. Several witnesses supported claims that Todd had total control over his wife and exhibited suspicious behavior. However, Todd presented a different narrative. He claimed that he spent nearly all his time with his wife and was very happy, asserting that there were no issues in their relationship. He stated that they had fully restored their previous harmonious and communication that they once had. However, during the investigation, it became clear that this was not entirely accurate. In July 2018, just a few months before the tragedy, Todd noticed changes in Amy's behavior, which led him to question her fidelity. He reviewed phone records and found that Amy had been communicating with another man, Jerry Frasher. Todd discovered around 120 messages exchanged between them and confronted Jerry directly. Jerry, who worked as an assistant on their farm and handled administrative tasks, denied having an affair, insisting that their correspondence was purely work-related. Todd was unable to access their message exchanges, which made him skeptical of Jerry's claims. He even contacted Jerry's wife, who reassured him that she trusted her husband completely and had no concerns about infidelity. This conversation seemed to ease Todd's worries, and he stopped suspecting his wife of any new infidelities. However, investigations later revealed that Amy and Jerry were romantically involved. Amy was having an affair again, which investigators believed could be a motive for murder. The police theorized that Todd discovered the affair, overwhelmed by shock, killed his wife. However, this theory was complicated by Todd's alibi. He had been with Tristan until Tristan went to check on his mother. Tristan claimed there were no arguments between his parents that day, and he had kept an eye on his father. Despite this, the police wanted to explore another possibility. Jerry Frasher might also have had a motive for murder. Jerry did not want to leave his family. Could he have killed Amy to keep his family intact? The detectives needed to investigate this angle as well. Amy often expressed frustration about Todd working too much, leaving her to handle various farm tasks that she disliked. She wanted to go out and enjoy life, spending more time in town. After trying to salvage her relationship, it became clear to her that she and Todd had significant differences. Jerry often visited the farm for work, where he interacted with Todd and Amy. Occasionally, he spoke with Amy privately, and their conversations gradually turned into flirting, then an intimate affair. This relationship began in late May 2018. The couple met about once a week for intimate, typically in cars on the farm's dirt roads or during brief stays in motel rooms. For Amy, it became a source of inspiration, leading her to express a desire to leave her husband and marry Jerry. This would require Jerry to get a divorce, but his wife was unaware of the affair. Jerry was content in his marriage and had no intention of divorcing. He did not take his relationship with Amy seriously and even wanted to end it, as he felt it had gone too far. Law enforcement officials recovered most of the letters exchanged between Jerry and Amy, revealing that their relationship lasted until the summer of 2018. At that point, Jerry suggested they slow things down because he was uncertain about their future together. Meanwhile, there were indications that Amy was determined to confess her feelings. This created a sense of threat for Jerry, providing him with a strong motive for murder. Jerry spent about an hour and a half confessing to the affair but maintained that he could not have killed Amy. He stated that at the time of the attack, he was at his home in Anamosa, which is a 45-minute drive from the crime scene. Investigators checked the mobile phone data of Jerry, which showed activity at the same times every hour. Jerry's cell phone active at around 10:45, 11:45, 12:45, all in Anamosa. However, this did not definitively confirm his alibi, as a calculated murderer would likely avoid taking their phone to the crime scene. The hourly activity raised suspicions, leaving him not entirely free from scrutiny. investigators were still focused on the widower, Todd. He had a significant financial motive as well. If a divorce occurred, he would have to pay more than half of his income to support their 3 children. Friends mentioned that Amy, despite wanting a divorce, was afraid to leave Todd because she feared his reaction. Some described him as rude and aggressive, suggesting he could be capable of murder, although he had never been seen treating his wife poorly. The investigators then turned their attention to Todd's behavior on the day of Amy's death. During questioning, his reactions raised suspicions. Typically, innocent people defend themselves aggressively, but Todd remained calm when asked about the murder allegations. This calmness could indicate subconscious guilt. Overall, he was known to be a calm person with a quiet temperament. The farm had several cameras, one of which had a view of almost the entire area around the barn, where the murder occurred. Unfortunately, no recordings from that day were saved. It appears someone deleted them to hide their involvement. Given the circumstances, the prime suspect was the victim's husband. In February 2019, Todd Mollis was arrested and charged with murdering his wife. Nearly a year after Amy's death, both her family and the relatives of Todd gathered at the courthouse. Todd, a hard-working farmer known for being a devoted father, now faced charges for the brutal murder of his wife. The defense attorney agreed with the prosecution that the crime was premeditated but argued that Todd could not have attacked his wife with the corn rake, as Tristan had been in sight of him the whole time. They claimed there was no physical evidence linking Todd to the crime, no fingerprints, no DNA on the corn rake, and no traces of the attacker were found. The prosecution countered that the murder was driven by a personal motive, emphasizing that it wasn't a distant shooting but rather a close-range attack using an unusual weapon from the farm's tools. If a stranger had committed the crime, they likely wouldn't have used a tool found on the farm. Todd was familiar with that corn rake, skilled in its use, and knew exactly where it was kept. He acted decisively, leaving Amy no chance to escape. He attacked her multiple times. During the trial, many witnesses who knew both Amy and Todd testified. One of them was a doctor from the emergency room where the victim had worked as a nurse for many years. Amy was brought to the same hospital where she had previously saved lives. Unfortunately, shortly after her arrival, she was declared dead by the medical examiner and law enforcement. The doctors were puzzled by how a single blow from a 4-pronged corn rake could cause 6 deep wounds on Amy's body. The eldest son, Tristan, served as the main witness for the defense. Both sides carefully examined his statements during the hearings. The prosecution faced a challenge with the alibi that Tristan maintained. However, just days before the trial began, law enforcement re-interviewed Tristan. He admitted that he had lost sight of his father several times while fetching water for the shed, but insisted that his father was only gone for a few minutes each time. The defendant's lawyer argued that this brief absence was not enough time to commit the crime and hide the evidence. Yet, during the trial, Tristan changed his testimony again, stating that he could not accurately determine how long his father had been missing. This gave the prosecution a chance to highlight Todd's lack of an alibi. However, Tristan insisted that his father could not have killed his mother and claimed he did not see any blood on him, which allowed the defense attorney to build their argument. The defense maintained that Todd did not have enough time to get water, go to the shed, deal with his wife, and return. Furthermore, the blood spatter in the room where the attack took place was too extensive for the attacker to avoid getting covered in blood. The lawyer argued that the prosecution had no direct evidence against Todd, which was true. The case also leaned on the search histories of both the victim and the accused. Amy had searched online about how infidelity could affect property division in a divorce, while Todd's phone had concerning searches related to the consequences of murder. During the trial, Todd spent 3 hours answering the prosecutor's questions, maintaining his innocence and claiming he was unaware of Amy's new relationship. He explained to the jury that the security cameras were not functioning during the attack because, in his view, the cats had accidentally disconnected the wires while looking for a warm spot. Investigators was revealed that the cameras had been out of order for 2 weeks before Amy's death, and Todd only repaired the system after the police discovered the disconnected wires. By the end of the interrogations, the jury began deliberating the verdict. Because there was no direct evidence and many disagreements about the case, the jurors split into two groups with opposing opinions. After about 7 hours of discussion, Todd Mollis was found guilty of first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Disappointed, Todd shook his head as he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He immediately disagreed with the verdict once it was announced. He hired a new legal team and filed a motion for a retrial. Todd argued that no one was in the shed when his wife accidentally fell on a corn rake after losing consciousness. She had been feeling dizzy and even visited the hospital the day before her death. There was no substantial evidence against Todd, just speculation and rumors, but his appeal was denied. Now, he is focused on appealing the verdict from prison and believes that justice will eventually be served. He feels an accidental incident took the life of a mother of 3, and an unjust legal system took their father from them. Todd and Amy Mollis's 3 children are now cared for by Amy's family. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Heath Stocks. On January 17, 1997, a man in Lonoke, Arkansas, made what he calls one of the greatest mistakes of his life. 20-year-old Heath Stocks loved his family. One minute he arrived at his family home, the next minute, he found his entire family dead on the living room floor. To this day, he claims that his mother and sister always supported him. Although he and his father had a tumultuous relationship, he maintains that they did not deserve to die. This is the story of Heath Stocks, Jack Walls, and the Boy Scouts of America. Lonoke, Arkansas is a quaint town that many would describe as the ideal American life. Like any small town, the residents were family-oriented, and their bonds were tight. The residents of Lonoke held their values close to their chests, and the town became a standout moral compass to those around it. 3 of the most prevalent aspects of Lonoke were its dutiful church scene, appreciation for sports, and love for the Boy Scouts, along with their mantra, respect, honor, and obey. Much like many boys in America, Heath Stocks was a longtime member of the Boy Scouts, eventually reaching the coveted Eagle Scout status. His mother, Barbara, and his sister, Heather, shared a tight bond with him throughout his childhood. The only wedge in this seemingly perfect family life appeared to be his father, Joe. Heather was definitely his protector. She apparently felt very threatened by their father because Heath wasn't going to be the perfect child. Heath did typical kid things and made kid mistakes that were unacceptable to Joe. He struggled with learning disabilities and had ADHD, which affected his ability to get work done at school. Heath and his group had a favorite scoutmaster, Charles Jack Walls III, who was kind and doting. The boys under his care quickly formed a strong bond with Walls. Not only was he a respected father, but the Walls name was well known in Lonoke, thanks to his family's wealth and his father's work as a judge. Everyone wanted to be one of Walls's boys. Stocks himself said in an interview at the time that when people had problems with their boys, Walls always said he could put them in the Scouts and mold them into upstanding young men that their parents could be proud of. The use of the word mold in Stocks' recounting is particularly haunting, considering the context of his case. Walls was not just a guide, he was a leader, a great influence, a savior, as Stocks' grandmother put it. Now, that term drips with painful irony. The people of Lonoke, Arkansas, would look at Jack Walls and describe him as magic. He was a perfect citizen who encouraged young children to be the best they could be, a role model for all. To most, he was the ideal American citizen, the perfect person to look after their children. Unfortunately, that trust would be shattered in one of the most gruesome ways. For many parents of Scouts under Walls, he became a confidant for any issues or conflicts. The Scouts would report their worries to Walls, and in turn, their parents would seek advice from him. This allowed Walls to insert himself into the family dynamics of countless people. When their parents were not spending time with their children, Walls sometimes took on the role of teacher, introducing them to military skills as they shot guns and hunted. Other times, the topics veered into discussions about alcohol and adult magazine. Two of his scouts, Doug Hogan and Mark McConnell, reported Walls' misconduct to their families in the summer of 1992. Cletus Hogan, Doug Hogan's father, had Jack Walls resign from the Boy Scouts of America after reporting the incident. However, when he turned the case over to the courts, Walls used his reputation and power within the Lonoke community to get the charges dismissed, slandering the Hogan as people who wanted a part of Walls' fortune. Doug Hogan, in turn, became a target for the other boys in the Scouts due to their growing protectiveness of Walls and their newfound skills in firearms. Heath Stocks was one of the boys groomed by Walls during this time. Behind the scenes, Walls began sowing discord between Stocks and Stocks' father, further establishing himself as a father figure in Stocks' life. Joe Stocks, Stocks' father, was distant and often physically disciplined him as a child, so Stocks turned to his trusted scout leader with his boyhood problems, further entrenching himself under Walls' control. When Stocks' mother, Barbara, discovered that he had been assaulted by Walls, she insisted that Stocks file charges against him. However, the charges all but disappeared by the time Stocks entered college. He sought Walls' approval for almost everything he did. Walls had firmly grasped control over Stocks' life, and the turmoil that Stocks experienced would soon come to a head. After Stocks took a weekend off from college, one horrifying day, Barbara walked in on Walls and Stocks together. She never blamed her son, nor did she attempt to interrogate him. She simply went to her pastor to seek advice on the terrifying situation. Stocks inevitably confided in his mother and sister Heather about what had been happening to him. This sent Walls into a frenzy and asked him to solve the problem. After years of insistence that Walls' protection was of the utmost importance, Stocks heard the order and obeyed. On the evening of January 17, 1997, Stocks went to his family home and ransacked it. His sister walked in just as he had his mouth around the barrel of a .45 caliber handgun. Their mother followed her soon after, and then their father seconds later. They were dead. Heath had taken the gun and shot them all. He had killed the problem as ordered. His entire family was dead, and as the courts would soon find, it was entirely his fault. Even if Walls was there to ensure the deed was done, it was Stocks who pulled the trigger. Stocks said he went back into the living room, got on his knees, and stuck his gun in his mouth. About that time, his mom came through, and he saw his dad's face. The next thing he knew, they're all dead. Stocks fled the scene and disposed of his gun in a nearby river. The other items were put inside a dumpster by a Pizza Hut in town. Stocks sought solace at the apartment of a college friend at Henderson State University, where police would find and arrest him at 6 a.m. the next day. Heath Stocks was charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Investigator Steve Finch led the Stocks family murder investigation and conducted several interviews with Stocks to determine the motive for the murders. It was then that Stocks reported the manipulation and abuse he suffered at the hands of his scoutmaster to the police. It was speculated that Walls was even present during the murders, and yet, when Stocks was arrested and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, Walls was not brought under investigation. No display of evidence, no calling of witnesses, and no defense whatsoever. The guilty plea, made at Walls' command, provided little reason or purpose. However, Walls would not remain innocent forever. Eventually, an investigation was launched against Walls thanks to the bravery of his own nephew, another victim of Walls. Like the other victims, Wade Knox had a strong relationship with his uncle. Knox joined the Boy Scouts because of Walls' influence and wanted Walls as his troop leader. He was also a part of Stocks' Boy Scout troop. There were many similarities between the young Stocks and Knox, from their upbringing to their personal difficulties, which Walls exploited like a parasite. Karen Knox said of her son, Knox was probably 6 or 7 when he joined the Boy Scouts. He became a Boy Scout because of Walls. Walls was his uncle and encouraged it. It was as normal as it could be. When Knox was 5, she noticed things about him that just weren't right. He had attention deficit issues, he was on medication, and then he was diagnosed with dyslexia. They knew it was going to be hard. By third grade, things fell apart at school. Wade could no longer play sports or get along with anybody. He did not respect authority. It was just constant turmoil. Knox would get so upset that he would run away, and Walls would smooth everything over. They lived right across the street from Walls, and there were always scouts over there. Wade Knox, Walls' nephew, had been abused by his uncle since the age of 7. Reportedly, when Walls was out washing his car, Knox put a gun to Walls' head and forced Walls to confess to Wade's parents that he, his brother, and several other scouts, including Heath, had repeatedly abused by him. Later traumatized by the things Walls had done to him, Wade Knox committed and his own life. His family started the Wade Knox Children's Advocacy Center in hopes that no other family would have to endure the turmoil they experienced. In hindsight, many people who view the case of the Stocks family murders speculate that Stocks did not act alone and that the trial was mishandled. Many believe that a guilty plea by Stocks would not have been submitted if proper action had been taken by the investigators. These claims, while lacking physical evidence, were supported by the then special prosecutor, Betty Dickey. Due to Walls' influence over the town, the victims' families were not going to file charges and simply allowed Walls to admit himself into a mental health facility. This changed as soon as they learned of the details of what Walls had done to their children. This was when Stocks admitted that Walls had ordered him to kill his parents, claiming Walls was present to ensure it was done. Though in later interviews, Stocks stated he did not remember if anyone else was in the house on the day he killed his family. Eventually, Walls was charged with 6 counts of abuse assault, no penalties in connection with the Stocks family case. He now serves 1 life sentence plus an additional 40 years. Betty Dickey remarked about the incident, they were looking at 50 to 100 young boys over a period of 20 to 30 years that he'd molested. The reason only 6 counts were charged against Walls was due to the statute of limitations. In 2020, Heath Stocks was interviewed by Fox 16 about the murders and the abuse he suffered at the hands of Jack Walls. Surprisingly, he did not blame the Boy Scouts for the abuse, despite their recent bankruptcy and the abuse scandals that had emerged. He did not even blame Walls himself for his parents' deaths. Stocks claims he has forgiven Walls, mainly for his own mental health. Also asserting that although Walls was not responsible for pulling the trigger, he was the reason Stocks' mind had been warped enough to commit such a gruesome act. Stocks also places blame on his parents for insisting that he remain in the Boy Scouts despite several warning signs. Currently, Stocks remains in prison with a lifetime of incarceration ahead of him. If he had not been subjected to such thorough abuse in his childhood years, his family would still be alive today. Stocks had been a victim of gruesome crimes for years, which deteriorated his mental health until he hit rock bottom. 3 of the closest people in his life were dead due to his actions and the abuse of a powerful man. If Jack Walls had not taken the innocence of over 50 young Boy Scouts, much could have been saved and protected. His nephew, Wade Knox, would also be alive. Justice may have been served when Walls received his lifetime sentence, but there are questions that still remain unanswered. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Paulson. Jennifer Paulson was born on June 23, 1979, in Washington, USA. She grew up in a close-knit family filled with love and warmth. Jennifer has 2 older brothers and shares a strong bond with them. She was a kind child who absorbed everything around her and made friends easily. As a result, she had a large circle of friends and could connect with anyone, regardless of their differences. Jennifer graduated from the Christian Academy, where she excelled academically. She was always eager to help her classmates who were struggling with their studies. In addition to her academic achievements, Jennifer was active in extracurricular activities. She published the weekly school news, tutored part-time, and participated in volleyball, basketball, and softball. A prominent feature of Jennifer and her family was their strong faith. She attended church services every Sunday. After graduating, she attended Seattle Pacific University, about an hour's drive from her parents' home. She set her sights on becoming a teacher, wanting to use her academic achievements to help her community. She excelled in school, earning a bachelor's degree in teaching and then a master's degree in education. During her time in college, Jennifer also volunteered with low-income families, focusing on helping children prepare for college. She has always believed that education is the key to building a successful future. After graduating, Jennifer sought employment and began her career as a substitute teacher at Pierce County Schools. Eager to advance her career, she worked hard to secure a permanent teaching position. She was soon hired by several schools, and in 2004, she became a full-time teacher at Hunt Middle School and Stanley Elementary School. In 2007, she joined Bernie Elementary School, where she dedicated herself to teaching children with special needs and quickly became a favorite among the fifth graders. She believed that everyone deserved a chance at a better future, and helping them achieve that was her true calling as a teacher. She worked with students who faced serious challenges, including fifth graders who were still unable to read. Jennifer had an extremely busy schedule, balancing her teaching responsibilities with her efforts to support her students. While still attending college, she worked part-time at the cafeteria on campus. There, she met a new transfer student from another school named Jed Waits. He also worked at the cafeteria, and those who knew him well had nothing negative to say about him. One striking trait that people who don't know Jed will notice is his unusual style of dress. He often appears somber and frequently wears black. His friends believe that this preference for dark clothing stems from his creative eccentricity, which has been evident since a young age. Jed is an artist involved in a variety of creative activities. He has acted in plays, drawn cartoons for newspapers and yearbooks, and enjoys creating posters and flyers for youth groups. Jed is artistically gifted and can quickly come up with unique creative projects and execute them efficiently. This ability has earned him the respect of his teachers. Additionally, he leads his church's youth group and meets with students monthly to discuss spiritual topics and explore the Bible. Overall, he is a kind and optimistic person. When Jennifer met Jed, they worked together and socialized in the same group, where others often found Jed uncomfortable to talk to. His jokes were frequently considered inappropriate, dark, and confusing. Additionally, he was sometimes rude, even to Jennifer. Although there was no romantic relationship between them, it was clear that Jed had feelings for her. Jennifer, on the other hand, showed no interest in pursuing any relationship. She focused on her studies and had found a job that took up most of her free time. One day at school, Jed decided to express his feelings for Jennifer by asking her out. However, she reiterated what she had told many others before: she was not ready for a relationship until she had established her career. Jed struggled with the rejection, and in a moment of anger, he hit Jennifer, which caused a conflict between them. They resolved their differences amicably but chose to distance themselves, continuing their studies like other students. Both Jennifer and Jed graduated in 2003, with Jennifer earning a degree in special education and Jed earning a degree in English. Their friendship never recovered. In fact, they barely spoke to each other during their final years of school. After graduating from college, Jennifer moved back home with her family, found a job, and began saving money to buy her dream home. She was focused on her goals and wanted to be independent. However, an old acquaintance disrupted her plans. Somehow, Jed Waits discovered Jennifer's home phone number and called her for the first time 2 years after graduation. He said he had served in the National Guard in Kuwait and had just returned from a war zone. Jennifer was polite throughout the conversation and hoped he wouldn't call again, but from that day on, he started calling her frequently. At first, she ignored the calls, thinking he was just bored and contacting everyone, including her. However, she soon became concerned when Jed began calling multiple times a day, distracting and annoying her. When she asked their mutual friends, she learned that Jed didn't call anyone else. Realizing this made her feel uncomfortable, it seemed like he was obsessing over her, which was alarming. Jennifer told Jed that their relationship was impossible and asked him to stop contacting her. However, it seemed like he wasn't listening. Jed continued to call, forcing Jennifer to turn off her phone to avoid his constant calls. Thankfully, her family supported her during this difficult time. Meanwhile, Jed's parents had separated and moved in with new partners. By the fall of 2006, Jennifer Paulson had saved enough money for a down payment on a house and decided to buy one. She found a suitable place a few miles away from her family and was excited to be independent. She also hoped that the move would stop Jed's calls. To her surprise, just a few days after moving into her new home, she answered the phone and heard his familiar, annoying voice. She hadn't even finished unpacking when the call started again. For days, she ignored him, hoping that this would stop Jed's obsession. However, her relief did not last long. After a while, he continued to call her persistently. This situation reminded Jennifer of her past experiences, and surprisingly, Jed stopped stalking her for about a year. During this time, Jennifer was able to relax and thought that Jed might have found someone else. However, she was shocked when he called her back, acting as if nothing had changed, as if they had just met yesterday. From that point on, Jed continued to contact her regularly, calling about 10 times a day or even more. This pattern of behavior continued for several months before stopping for a long period. This pattern of harassment occurred several times over the years, following a similar trajectory each time. In 2008, Jed started calling her again, and this time it was even more disturbing because he had become more aggressive. Jennifer had no idea how far his obsession had gone until he showed up at her workplace. He casually walked past her office and entered without hesitation. This was the most terrifying experience for Jennifer. She realized that she had never told him where she worked, which meant he had been stalking her. Jed coming to her school and walking among the children terrified her. When she told her father, Ken Paulson, what was happening, he was fed up with Jed's constant harassment. Ken later called Jed and asked him to stay away from his daughter, warning him that there would be consequences if he didn't. Instead of staying away, Jed sent Jennifer a gift at work, a bouquet of flowers and a teddy bear. He later visited her in person again. During this meeting, Jennifer confronted him and asked him to stop coming to the school, warning that she would report him to the police if he continued to stalk her. She was genuinely worried about his obsessive behavior. Jennifer then informed the principal and school staff about the situation because she was concerned for the safety of the students. Everyone was alerted and prepared to call the police if he showed up at the school again. Unfortunately, Jed did not stop. The police were called to the school, and the principal was extremely concerned about the situation. He even contacted Jed's commanding officer in the National Guard, who revealed that Jed had a troubled military background. The commanding officer stated that Jed had served for nearly 2 years, but he had been behaving inappropriately from the beginning. During that time, he had gotten into several fights, spat on his teammates, and attacked his superiors. He was eventually deployed to Kuwait, where he finished his service without any commendation. The main reason for his discharge was a serious mental health issue. Jennifer became extremely concerned for her safety due to Jed's disturbing behavior. She then decided to file for a restraining order. In the application, she detailed Jed's inappropriate behavior, including repeated phone calls and unusual visits to her workplace. Jennifer Paulson was granted a restraining order, which legally prohibited Jed from coming within 300 meters of her, either at home or at work. While the order provided some peace of mind, Jennifer knew that it would not fully protect her if the harassment continued. She hoped that the police would respond more forcefully, which eased her concerns somewhat. Although she was frightened, she was prepared to take legal action against Jed if necessary. Jed was informed of the restraining order and the serious consequences he would face if he violated it. By this time, Jennifer was emotionally exhausted and showing signs of stress, but with the restraining order in place, she felt more secure in her life. Jennifer was shocked to see Jed's car honking at her in her rearview mirror. She quickly called 911 and explained that there was a restraining order against him and that she felt threatened. Eventually, the police advised her to drive calmly to the station. When she arrived, the police and their cars were waiting for Jed, who was arrested and taken in for immediate questioning. However, he denied the charges and refused to admit to any allegations related to stalking. While awaiting a court decision, the judge ordered Jed to be held in jail but set bail at $10,000. Normally, bail for such charges is around $2,000, but Jed's unpredictable and dangerous behavior prompted the judge to increase it significantly. Unfortunately, this precaution did not keep Jed in jail, as he was able to post bail. For days after his arrest, Jennifer and her family learned that he had been released. Everyone was in a panic. Jennifer chose not to return home, where she would be alone, and she did not go to work until the situation was resolved. She decided to stay with her family for support during this uncertain time. Jennifer decided to visit her mother. When she arrived, her mother greeted her in tears, expressing her fear that Jed would prevent her from entering the house. Jennifer was also very emotional but immediately expressed her desire to pray for Jed in this situation. She remained optimistic and kind, following her family's advice and staying with relatives. Her brothers planned to protect her at home by taking turns watching over her. However, Jennifer did not want to be confined to the house. She planned to continue working and could not abandon her students. On Friday at 7:30 a.m., Jennifer went to work, preparing to teach her first class of the day. About 400 students, from grades 1 through 5, along with teachers and staff, were at the school, unaware that they were in grave danger. Since 5:30 a.m., Jed had been nearby, parked in a hidden spot while he monitored the roads leading to the school, waiting for the right moment to approach his target. Jennifer arrived safely at work, parked in her usual spot, and walked toward the school. Everything seemed normal. Meanwhile, Jed got out of his car. As he approached her, he suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back. She screamed and collapsed on the asphalt, and he shot her 7 more times. A man who lived across the street witnessed the horrific scene through his window. He heard her scream but couldn't get there in time to help her. Jed then pointed his gun at a passerby and fired, but the man miraculously dodged the bullet. News outlets reported on the shooting at the school where Jennifer worked, urging locals to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary, as the shooter had fled. At the time, no details were available about the victims. Jennifer's father received the call, and her parents quickly drove to the school. They were horrified to learn that Jed had finally achieved his goal and were even more devastated to learn of Jennifer's death. The attack caused chaos, allowing the perpetrator to flee by car. Fortunately, several witnesses saw his face and got a good look at the car he used to escape. He was quickly identified as Jed Waits, the person against whom Jennifer had a restraining order. Only 20 minutes had passed when one of the patrol officers stopped Jed's car about 10 kilometers from the school where he had just killed Jennifer Paulson. The officers were cautious during the arrest, but the situation quickly escalated. Jed refused to surrender. He pulled out a gun and opened fire on the officers. Fortunately, the officers were prepared and returned fire immediately. Thankfully, no officers were injured. Jed was found to be carrying multiple weapons, possibly because he had anticipated a confrontation with the police. The patrol officers shot him multiple times, but the injuries were not fatal. Tragically, 30-year-old Jed Waits took his own life. When his family was informed of the incident, they were shocked. They had no idea that Jed had been involved in such activities for years. They could not believe that a once kind person had become a stalker and a murderer. Jed's family was profoundly affected by the school shooting. His parents were devastated, regretting that they had not been aware of Jed's problems and had not sought professional help sooner. For days after the tragedy, more than 1,500 mourners attended Jennifer Paulson's funeral at the city's cathedral, including friends, family, and classmates. She was well loved. Many of Jennifer's students were deeply saddened by the loss, as her family viewed her as a beacon of hope for their future. In memory of Jennifer Paulson, a garden was created on the school grounds, which remains to this day. About 50 students, mostly from her class, along with their families, contributed to the creation of the garden, each processing their loss in their own way. Jennifer's family struggled to come to terms with her tragic death. Her father, Ken Paulson, wanted to honor her memory by helping others. He spent years creating legislation to better protect victims of stalking, which he called the Jennifer Paulson Law. His main goal was to speed up the government's response to these cases to prevent similar incidents from happening again. The law also classifies online stalking as in-person stalking. Additionally, Ken advocated for public disclosure of information about individuals with a history of stalking, allowing people to check their acquaintances against available databases. If Jennifer had access to this information, she might have learned about his past troubles. In November 2008, after a court ordered Jed not to contact her, he attacked another girl. Although she narrowly escaped death and was seriously injured, the police did not intervene to stop Jed. As a result, he continued to stalk Jennifer. In the United States, victims of stalking are often required to provide evidence of stalking and harassment. In many cases, authorities simply issue warnings. When the initiative was finally enacted into law, Ken felt satisfied, believing it would save countless victims from the tragic consequences of stalking. Although he knew it would not bring back the life of his beloved daughter, Jennifer, who had died at the age of 30, he believed his efforts had been worthwhile. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Griffiths. In 2009, Mary Griffiths was a 38-year-old woman and the mother of 3 daughters, aged 9, 10, and 13. All 3 children were born during her marriage. However, her relationship with her husband did not last long. By 2007, they had divorced, but they remained on good terms. Mary was granted primary custody of the children while her ex-husband took them on weekends. There were no disputes regarding this arrangement. Mary focused on moving forward and providing for her daughters. She worked hard to ensure they had everything they needed. To save time on commuting and spend more time with her children, she found a job as a fitness instructor at a gym near her rented home. Over time, Mary was able to purchase a house in the small town of Berry Street, Edmonds, UK. Her life seemed to be improving more and more. Mary decided to try building a relationship again. With her good looks, attractiveness, and great physical shape, she felt confident that finding a partner wouldn't be a problem. Thanks to her outgoing personality and striking appearance, she quickly caught the attention of John McFarlane. They met during a time when both were searching for new jobs. As they got to know each other, they discovered a shared passion for martial arts, sports, and similar perspectives on life. Over time, Mary and John began taking the same fitness classes. They both became instructors at the same fitness center. Despite some clear differences between them, they connected easily. They began spending more time together, commuting to work, having lunch, and hanging out after their shifts. John even covered for Mary at work when she couldn't make it. However, for Mary, the relationship was just a friendship. Mary is outgoing, so she easily connects with people, including John. She considers him a friend and firmly believes their relationship is purely platonic. When speaking with her family and friends, she often emphasizes that there is absolutely no possibility of a romantic relationship between her and John, partly because he is married. Unfortunately, John saw things differently. He interpreted Mary's friendliness and conversations with him as a sign that they could become a couple. Deeply infatuated with her, he began to romanticize their interactions. Mary's behavior only reinforced his feelings. For years after they became friends, Mary helped organize John's 40th birthday party. John misinterpreted this gesture as something deeply personal, an indication that she had romantic feelings for him, which only reinforced his certainty about his feelings for her. John was naturally introverted and had little experience with women who offered him the kind of warmth and care that Mary did. His marriage had grown cold over time, so Mary's attitude felt especially significant to him. After the birthday party, he started dreaming of a life with her by his side. These fantasies quickly turned into an obsession, despite him still being married. He began discussing with his friends the possibility of divorcing his wife to pursue Mary. Mary, however, was unaware of his feelings. A few months later, she started dating someone else, which shocked and disappointed him. Mary was happy in her new relationship and openly shared details with him, not realizing the emotional pain it caused. For him, the situation became deeply traumatic. Resentment and anger built up over time, eventually becoming impossible for him to contain. Mary shared a post about her boyfriend on social media, and that was when the problem started. John responded to the post by leaving angry messages. He insulted Mary and made baseless accusations, including infidelity and a reckless lifestyle, none of which were true. John's behavior grew increasingly obsessive, and he started attempting to intimidate Mary through frequent and unsettling phone calls. Mary started to notice that John would appear at places she visited, even though he had no reason to know her whereabouts. Their interactions dwindled, and the distance between them grew, but John was clearly unhappy about this. The tension escalated further as he bombarded her with daily phone calls. His erratic behavior began to strain her relationship with her new boyfriend. Mary's friends and family observed that John acted as though they had been in a romantic relationship and believed she had betrayed him. He seemed consumed by these imagined scenarios, leading to ongoing dissatisfaction and aggression. Although John's actions were not illegal, Mary had made it clear on multiple occasions that she only considered him a friend and never intended for their relationship to be more than platonic. Unfortunately, John's perception of the situation did not align with reality. Mary grew increasingly anxious due to John's troubling behavior. Fearing his aggression, she avoided public places in the city, worried she might encounter him. Her fears escalated when an intruder entered her home late at night and slashed all 4 tires on her car. She suspected that John was responsible. She was convinced he wanted to sabotage her relationship with her new boyfriend, leaving her isolated. His interference was successful when he spread false information about her, ultimately causing her and her boyfriend to break up. Mary was devastated by the breakup, while John felt triumphant. Misinterpreting her distress, he believed she was now available and ready to be with him. He saw her resistance as playful teasing, deluding himself with fantasies about their connection. Feeling haunted, John took a drastic step. After learning that Mary had broken up with her boyfriend, he immediately went to court to file for divorce from his wife. Although they had been married for over 20 years, John was determined to leave and start a new life with another woman. This became particularly troubling when Mary found out. She couldn't understand where he was getting his ideas or what was influencing his decisions. The entire situation deeply unsettled her. Seeking advice, she often spoke with her relatives, who encouraged her to contact the police. Mary had enough evidence to take action against him, but her doing so only escalated the situation. John began bombarding Mary with calls and messages. In each message, he expressed his intense emotions, insisting they could be incredibly happy together if she agreed. He claimed Mary had feelings for him that she was suppressing, urging her to be honest and embrace them so they could pursue a life together. However, Mary had no such intentions. In one conversation, she firmly stated that they were just friends and that she had no plans to take their relationship beyond that. This upset John, as his perspective on friendship was different from Mary's. Yet, he couldn't resist trying to become more involved in her life. Although she rejected all his romantic advances, she still maintained their friendship. It seemed she pitied him, and perhaps even feared that ending their connection would lead to serious problems. Mary hoped to continue the relationship peacefully. He, however, took every opportunity to be near her, visiting her home frequently, and she always let him in. During these visits, he repeatedly made advances, such as attempting to kiss her when they sat together on the couch. Mary consistently rejected him, but he persisted. Mary considered ending the meetings, but John then used his cleverness to get closer to her daughters. He bonded with them, spending quality time together, and they began asking when he would visit again. After John's divorce, he spent almost all his free time with Mary and her children, as though he were waiting for them to invite him to live with them. Meanwhile, Mary's relationship with her ex-boyfriend remained unresolved. Both she and her ex had doubts and considered rekindling their relationship. However, those doubts were primarily rooted in John's behavior, making them uncertain about the possibility of being together again. Whenever John sees Mary and her ex-boyfriend together, he gets angry and often has aggressive outbursts. On one occasion, he lost control entirely. Still, she tried to remain patient, while John blamed her for the breakup of his relationship. Eventually, she asked her ex-boyfriend to visit her home more frequently to help her and her children feel safer during those moments. When John found out, he reacted badly. He began posting misleading content on social media, claiming he was in a relationship with Mary. Tired of the situation, she decided to put an end to it. She left a comment under the post, clearly stating that there was no relationship between them. In this situation, the most reasonable thing for John to do is leave Mary alone and focus on his life, allowing her to mend her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. However, John went to Mary's house again instead. By exploiting her sympathy, he convinced her to let him in. Mary, having a kind heart and considering him a friend, allowed him to stay the night, offering him the couch. It was a stormy evening, and she didn't have it in her to leave him out in the bad weather. He appealed to her compassion, reminding her of his struggles after being kicked out by his wife. The arrangement was that he would sleep on the couch, and the next morning, after the children left for school, they would discuss and clarify the situation. For John, it was all just a game. That same night, he attempted to seduce Mary. Mary, however, believed that he stood in her doorway at night, watching her as she slept. At the time, she was in bed with her youngest daughter, who was afraid to sleep alone in her room. She woke up feeling unnerved by his unsettling gaze. She began yelling at him to go away, which woke the children. The incident led to another heated outburst, during which John accused his friend of giving false hope only to crush it for his own amusement. Afterwards, John left, but things took an even darker turn. He started posting alarming content on his social media accounts, talking about death and hinting at ending his life. He also shared these thoughts with many of his friends. At one point, he even shared a disturbing photo of himself standing next to a noose in a barn, as if he were preparing to follow through on his threats. His actions escalated further when he attempted to swallow sleeping pills on 2 separate occasions in a short time span, both of which required medical intervention. On May 3, 2009, John's behavior had become so troubling that Mary insisted he see a psychiatrist. His friends, including his ex-wife, agreed with her. However, the psychiatrist could not diagnose John with any mental disorders and concluded that he was not a danger to himself or others. This misjudgment would prove to be the first in a series of tragic mistakes with devastating consequences. It seemed that John was aware of the issues he was facing and became distressed when the doctors decided not to treat him or admit him to a psychiatric clinic. This news deeply frightened Mary. She felt threatened, worried for the girls around her, and helpless in the face of this danger. On May 5, 2009, Mary's worst fears began to come true. That day, she called emergency services at 999. She told the operator that her friend, John, was acting erratically and appeared to have gone crazy. His alarming behavior left her anxious and unsure of how to handle the situation. Mary explained his history of stalking, his inappropriate actions, and his references to ending his life. Despite these concerns, the operator assessed the situation as non-urgent, indicating a response time of 1 to 4 hours, as all officers were occupied. Mary was informed that a police officer would only be able to visit her the following morning. The operator advised her to call again if the situation escalated, promising a faster response in that case. However, Mary had valid reasons for her initial call. On that day, John attacked her for the first time, exploiting his knowledge of her vulnerabilities. Injured in the attack, she sought treatment for her leg at the hospital. But upon returning home, she found John waiting for her. He was relentless, always lingering near her, pretending to support her, and trying to convince her that she could not live without him. The situation became so dire that when Mary was putting her daughters to bed, The girls were deeply afraid that John might return and harm their mother, possibly taking her away forever. John, finally driven away, was furious. He sent Mary a threatening message, feeling rejected and vowing revenge. Those who knew him were deeply concerned about his behavior and even alerted the police. For instance, Mary's friend called emergency services at around 6:30 p.m. that same day, expressing worry about John's mental state due to his volatile actions. Despite clear evidence of John's dangerous behavior, the authorities failed to take Mary's friend's warning seriously or consider the urgency of her earlier call. Much later, close to midnight, John himself made another call to the police to report a robbery. This ensured that the officers would respond to his call, giving him the opportunity to go to Mary's house. Before leaving, he sent a message to his wife, expressing that he still loved her but blaming her for their problems and the breakup with Mary. He ended the message with an ominous and ambiguous note, suggesting he planned to resolve matters once and for all. John armed himself with an axe and a specialized weapon used for slaughtering cattle, then headed toward Mary's house. At the time, Mary was resting with her children, completely unaware of the impending danger. Around midnight, John arrived at her house, standing near the back door. He used the axe to break in, then threw it in the kitchen. He proceeded to locate the fuse box, which he knew from previous visits, and cut off the electricity to the entire house. With the power out, he climbed the stairs to the second floor. Mary was asleep in her room with her 10-year-old daughter but woke up when she heard someone entering. Confused, she tried to turn on the light and realized it wasn't working. In a moment of terror, she recognized who the intruder must be. Before she could act, John attacked her. He began hitting her and dragged her out of the bed onto the floor, where he pinned her down and started choking her. The commotion woke up all the children in the house. They tried to resist John, but he was much stronger than they were. He injured 2 children and attacked Mary, aiming for her chest. She managed to dodge, but the bullet hit her shoulder, leaving her wounded. This escalated into a desperate fight for survival. Despite her injury, she fought back with all her strength. Realizing she couldn't overpower him, she decided to reach the street, hoping to draw him away from the children and call for help. Mary's 2 daughters were injured and unable to resist any longer, and Mary tried her best to protect them. John attempted to strangle her but failed. Injured and desperate, she struggled to make her way to the front door. She managed to run down the stairs and out onto the street, screaming for help. Her cries caught the attention of the neighbors, who began coming outside to see what was going on. Several witnesses saw John holding a weapon, which he pointed at Mary's chest as she stood terrified. In front of everyone, including children, he attacked twice. Among the neighbors was an off-duty policeman who had been at home resting. The officer approached John, trying to calm him down and reason with him. Without hesitation, he aimed the weapon at the officer, threatening to attack. Unarmed, the policeman raised his hands and retreated, a move that likely saved his life. Afterward, John struck Mary's youngest daughter and fled the scene. Among the neighbors were doctors who attempted to assist Mary while waiting for an ambulance, but tragically, their efforts were in vain. She passed away. 2 of her daughters required hospital treatment, though their injuries were not severe, at least physically. Thankfully, the situation did not escalate to the worst-case scenario. Later, it was revealed that John's original plan was not to harm Mary but to target her children. However, his plan didn't go as intended. He had also planned to take his own life in Mary's home to ensure she lived with the resulting trauma. He shared this sinister plan with a friend through a messaging app, explaining that this was his idea of revenge for Mary breaking his heart. Sadly, the friend dismissed these remarks and did not intervene, merely advising John to return to his wife and calm down. After attacking Mary, John immediately wrote to the same friend and confessed what he had done. He was later found bleeding near the house where he had been living for the past few weeks. Upon returning to the house, he attempted to end his life by cutting his wrist but was rescued in time. After regaining consciousness, he claimed to experience memory lapses. He stated that he recalled multiple attempts to end his life, including one just before his arrest. John told the police about his relationship with Mary, describing how she had rejected and betrayed him. Vaguely, he remembered fragments of their fight and the attack, but most of his memories were missing. While it appeared that he may have been in a state of emotional distress, the detectives believed he was feigning mental health issues to avoid responsibility for his actions. Their suspicions were reinforced by evidence that John had carefully planned the crime. He had shared the plan with a friend, said goodbye to his ex-wife, and even contacted the authorities beforehand to delay their arrival. John took weapons from the farm where he worked and spent additional time at the fitness center prior to committing the crime. This further demonstrates that his actions were intentional, in contrast to those of individuals suffering from severe mental illnesses. Predictably, the defense attorney argued that John suffered from a mental disorder and had endured a difficult childhood. Following this argument, John was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed that he had a severe form of depressive disorder. Despite receiving this diagnosis, he did not admit guilt, claiming that he could not remember anything. Initially, the prosecution aimed to prove premeditated murder in court, but this course of action was eventually deemed unnecessary. After assessing all relevant factors, John's lawyer advised him to accept responsibility. John changed his testimony and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, although he maintained that much of what had occurred was beyond his memory. For Mary's family, this confession brought some degree of relief. Nevertheless, they were compelled to endure the hearing, during which they agonizingly learned the harrowing details of Mary's final moments. John McFarlane received a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Typically, parole for such crimes is not considered until after 30 years. However, the court reduced the minimum term to 20 years, citing confirmed mental health issues as a mitigating factor. Mary's family was outraged that the court had considered John's mental health as justification for a reduced sentence. They strongly believed that John deserved a far harsher punishment, arguing that he not only killed Mary but also posed a serious threat to others, including her children. In their view, John should remain isolated from society permanently. The family testified to John's obsessive and dangerous behavior, presenting evidence that he had initially planned to harm the children. Ultimately, it appeared that Mary's desperate struggle with John had diverted his attention away from the children, but at the cost of her own life. Due to the persistent efforts of Mary's family, the case was reviewed. As a result, John's minimum sentence of 20 years was increased to the standard 30 years. Following the retrial, the senior investigator approached Mary and expressed hope that the revised decision and extended sentence would provide her greater comfort. However, the matter did not end there. Mary's children, Sophie, the youngest, turned 18, Hannah, 19, and Jessica, 22, jointly decided to pursue accountability for those they believed had contributed to John's attack. They held the police department, specifically the dispatcher, and the psychiatrist who had deemed John sane and failed to mandate psychiatric treatment, responsible for their perceived negligence. They argued that if the danger posed by John had been fully understood, Mary might still be alive. This seemed logical, as even a brief conversation with a psychiatrist, who had evaluated John after his arrest, reportedly revealed signs of mental illness. Serious psychological issues had clearly been overlooked, and it remained unclear why 2 previous hospital tests had failed to detect similar problems. It became evident that the response to calls placed by Mary and her friend, made only half an hour apart, was inadequate. The dispatcher underestimated the severity of the situation, which they believed to be the main reason the police failed to respond in time to prevent the tragedy. This failure prompted revisions to several regulations aimed at improving threat detection and enhancing police procedures. It was decided that law enforcement officers had fulfilled everything correctly within the regulations. However, Sophie, Hannah, and Jessica do not lose hope that their efforts were not in vain and that this will at least help save the lives of other victims. Moldova, December 2020. In the courtroom, silence reigns, broken only by the occasional click of camera shutters On the defendant's bench sits 21-year-old Anna Lajkovic, a medical student. These are her first public hearings since her arrest, and her behavior shocks everyone present. She does not hide from the cameras. She reclines casually on the bench, cleaning her nails, smiling as if she were at a fashion shoot, rather than in court. The prosecutor read the indictment. Anna was convicted of the murder of her mother, Dr. Praskovia Lajkovic. She listens silently, her gaze vacant and indifferent. Moldova is a small Eastern European state, nestled between Ukraine and Romania. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the country has struggled for decades with poverty, political instability. Salaries are among the lowest in Europe. Thousands of citizens leave each year to work abroad, and corruption remains pervasive. In European rankings, Moldova consistently occupies the lowest positions, surpassed only by a few other post-Soviet states. Amid this general decline, the autonomous region of Gagauzia stands out. Located in the south of the country, roughly 60 miles from the capital, it is a territory with special status and its own parliament. The local population, mostly Gagauz, live modestly. Working in agriculture and small businesses, unemployment is higher here than in other regions. Yet, among ordinary homes, one can spot mansions built by those who tapped into local political or commercial structures. Anna was born in Comrat, the capital of Gagauzia, into a family whose status contrasted sharply with most others. The Lajkovic, Aladov family was among those in Moldova who lived by their own rules. Anna's father, Vasily Aladov, was a well-known entrepreneur and politician in Gagauzia, deeply involved in the region's public life. He owned several plots of land and companies whose income often did not match the figures in official reports. He faced repeated investigations on suspicion of financial irregularities and budget manipulation. Yet all cases were eventually closed without consequence. Vasily Aladov attempted twice to become governor of Gagauzia. Both campaigns ended in scandal. The first, disqualified due to insufficient verified signatures. The second, after the Ministry of Justice uncovered forged documents and signs of vote tampering. Despite his failed bids, he retained a position in local government and continued his business activities. Maintaining a reputation as a powerful figure, few dared to challenge. Anna's mother, Praskovia Lajkovic, came from a very different background. A physician by training, she graduated from medical school with honors, worked closely with clinics in Germany. Her career took her between Moldova and Germany, often traveling for assignments. She was regarded as a self-made woman, a model of intelligence and hard work. She provided her daughter with comfort, educational opportunities, and professional connections. The marriage between Vasily and Praskovia was short-lived, as their ambitions and outlooks clashed. After the divorce, Vasily quickly remarried, and Anna gained a half-brother from that union. Despite her parents' separation, Anna's financial situation remained unchanged. She was raised in a world of abundance, little oversight. In her world, money solved everything. Boundaries were non-existent. She was granted near-complete freedom, indulging in impulsive behavior and facing few consequences for school conflicts. Any criticism from teachers or school staff was often followed by those individuals losing their jobs at her parents' behest. Over time, this shaped a personality that didn't recognize limits. Someone who believed every problem could be resolved through connections or wealth. It was her father's political influence, her mother's career success, and the complete lack of structure that formed the basis of Anna Lajkovic's worldview. From a young age, Anna lived in what could be described as a gilded cage, a world where everything revolved around her. Her parents provided everything they believed symbolized success: private schooling, international travel. However, they neglected core elements of upbringing, such as discipline, responsibility, and boundaries. Praskovia, constantly juggling business trips and her medical career. Tried to compensate for her absences with gifts, attention whenever possible. Vasily, with his influence and access, never denied Anna anything. Whatever she wanted, a new item, a vacation, a spot in an elite event, was granted without discussion. No was not part of their vocabulary. Household staff never stayed long. According to people familiar with the family, nannies and helpers frequently faced rude behavior and temperamental demands. This same pattern played out at school. When teachers offered criticism, Anna responded aggressively, and her parents intervened to resolve matters with the administration. Over time, she absorbed a simple lesson. When things didn't go her way, it was someone else's fault. Psychologists describe this kind of upbringing as a breeding ground for narcissistic traits. A young person raised in such an environment can grow up believing their wants matter more than anything else. In Anna's case, that belief was only reinforced by her family's wealth and influence. In a world where money replaced authority, boundaries eventually disappeared altogether. Former classmates recalled that Anna always carried herself as someone special. She craved the spotlight, couldn't handle criticism, and believed she deserved to be treated differently. Even minor slights were taken as personal offenses, and genuine emotional connection seemed to be missing entirely. People were, to her, more like tools for getting what she wanted. By the time she reached her teenage years, this behavior pattern was firmly established. Empathy never took root because neither her family nor her surroundings modeled it. Over time, Anna developed a personality marked by confidence, isolation, and a lack of internal limits. She didn't grasp the line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. By the time Anna entered college, she had a clear understanding of her advantages, on her appearance, her financial freedom, and a life largely free from rules. After finishing high school, she enrolled in medical school at a university in Russia. She performed well academically, but her interest in medicine ran shallow. For her, studying medicine wasn't about helping others. It was about building an image. It aligned with her desire for status, something she could showcase publicly. Alongside school, she began experimenting with modeling. At first, it was small gigs, photo shoots for local agencies, minor runway events, and commercials. Success in that world deepened her sense of being exceptional. She started attending more social events, networking with young entrepreneurs and influencers. Around this time, she launched her Instagram account, which quickly became her primary tool for self-promotion. Her feed was carefully curated: designer outfits, European vacations, upscale restaurants, exclusive parties, luxurious hotel stays, and a depiction of unconstrained campus life. Each post projected the image of a budding European influencer, a young woman who combined brains, beauty, and independence. By 2020, she had over 10,000 followers, a substantial audience in Moldova, a country with just over 2 million people. The more Anna flaunted her polished lifestyle, the more she craved validation. Likes and comments became a measure of her worth. When she is not given regular attention, she feels anxious, irritable. Eventually, her need for quick gratification spilled beyond social media. It began with alcohol at parties and events, then escalated to stronger substances. The crowd she spent time with didn't see this as a problem. Using illegal substances was viewed as part of the European leisure scene. Outwardly, Anna still looked poised and polished, but mentally, she was beginning to unravel. Her parents tried to intervene. Scovia hired a therapist, hoping regular sessions would help stabilize her daughter. However, therapy didn't work. Anna saw it as an attempt to control her and refused to engage in meaningful conversations about her behavior. By that point, a growing emotional distance had formed between them. Over time, Anna's reliance on substances became ingrained in her persona. She could hide the consequences in front of a camera, but those close to her began to notice the changes. dramatic mood swings, sleepless nights, and emotional outbursts. What remained of her former success was merely a shell. Online, she still appeared confident and carefree, but offline, she was losing touch with herself and with the world she once believed she controlled. In mid-2020, Anna returned from Russia to Moldova. Praskovia hoped that being back home would help her daughter recover. They began living together again in Comrat, in the house that used to feel empty due to Praskovia's frequent business trips. At first, things seemed calm. Praskovia focused on rebuilding trust, avoided arguments, and continued paying for psychological sessions. Anna agreed to attend, but took none of it seriously. FDs. For her, these visits were just something to get through, not a genuine effort to change. It didn't take long for her mother to realize that the calm exterior masked irritation and aggression. Praskovia explained her daughter's behavior as stress, burnout, but the signs of dependency were becoming impossible to ignore. Late-night activity, constant phone calls to friends, emotional instability. On several occasions, she found pills and empty medication packaging in Anna's room, none of which had been prescribed. Then, in the fall of 2020, the first serious crisis hit. Anna was found unconscious in her room after what doctors later confirmed was an overdose. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, caused by the use of banned substances. That was the moment Praskovia realized she couldn't handle this alone anymore. After her daughter was discharged, she insisted on full-time supervision and suggested a stay at a rehabilitation center. Anna flatly refused. She told her mother it was a one-time mistake and swore it wouldn't happen again. In an effort to maintain some peace, Praskovia backed off, opting instead for home care and close medical monitoring. For a short while, it seemed like things were improving. Anna was spending more time at home, focusing on her studies, and appeared calmer. But that calm didn't last. Within weeks, the tension returned. Their relationship grew increasingly strained. Any mention of treatment would trigger explosive reactions from Anna. Praskovia tried a softer approach, but every conversation ended in conflict. The house, once a symbol of stability, turned into a battleground of silent hostility. By the end of the year, the atmosphere had become unbearable. Praskovia contacted doctors, researched clinics, and began preparing paperwork for involuntary treatment. It was a last resort. She had no other option. In the final weeks leading up to the tragedy, the tension inside the house had reached a breaking point. Two women under the same roof, living in what felt like two separate realities. A mother desperately trying to save her daughter, and a daughter unwilling, horrify, to admit she needed help. December 4, 2020. Praskovia had just returned from Germany, where she'd spent several days at a professional conference. Friends later said she looked tired but composed and planned to spend the weekend at home with her daughter. That evening, around 7:00 p.m., she arrived at the house she and Anna shared. The housekeeper wasn't there that night. Praskovia had made a firm decision. After repeated failed attempts to convince Anna to enter treatment willingly, she had gathered all the necessary paperwork and filled out the referral forms for a private clinic. At first, the conversation was calm. Praskovia explained why treatment was necessary, framing it as a chance for Anna to regain control of her life. Anna responded first with indifference, then with irritation. When her mother revealed that everything had already been arranged, that doctors were expecting them the next morning, the tension exploded into shouting. According to investigators, Anna accused her mother of controlling her, interfering, and trying to humiliate her. Praskovia tried to de-escalate the situation, but emotions had gone too far. Around 8:00 p.m., there was a sudden outburst of aggression. Anna went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. She took a knife and stabbed her mother in the chest multiple times. While Praskovia was left bleeding on the floor, Anna is said to have cut out her still beating heart. What followed happened in a matter of minutes. Afterward, Anna went to the bathroom, She carefully cleaned herself, changed clothes, and left the house. Investigation documents noted that she showed no visible signs of panic and kept her phone, personal documents with her. Anna went to her boyfriend's nearby apartment. According to him, she walked in calmly and said, "It's over. She's not in the way anymore." At first, he thought it was just a dramatic way of describing a fight. But as Anna shared more details, laughing almost jokingly, he began to realize it might be more serious. When he asked her directly if she was telling the truth, she just shrugged and laughed. Late that night, they left his apartment, bought champagne, and went out to a restaurant. Witnesses said Anna showed no signs of stress. She looked relaxed, even carefree. After dinner, she stayed the night at his place. The next morning, while Anna was still asleep, her boyfriend decided to check for himself. He went to the Lajkovic home. The front door was unlocked, and the house was silent. Inside the house, he was horrified to discover Praskovia's body. Immediately, he called emergency services. Law enforcement arrived shortly after. Officers documented the scene and quickly identified Anna as a person of interest. Neighbors reported hearing, shouting the night before, but said they hadn't intervened, assuming it was a typical family argument. After receiving a report from Anna's boyfriend, a search for the suspect was launched. Authorities eventually located her at a friend's home in a nearby district. During the arrest, she didn't resist. She was calm and detached. After her arrest, Anna was taken to the Comrat Police Department holding facility. Detectives pieced together a clear timeline of her actions after the incident and determined that she had composure, showing no visible panic. During her first interrogation, Anna denied any wrongdoing and appeared confident. Her answers were brief, often accompanied by a faint smile. One investigator later said it seemed as if she didn't take any of it seriously. That impression would later be confirmed by a psychological evaluation. Experts observed a lack of emotional response to the gravity of the situation, something that diverged sharply from what would be expected in a high-stress event. The assessment described Anna as having strong narcissistic tendencies, a pattern of manipulative behavior, and a flair for the dramatic. She showed no signs of remorse or guilt. Meanwhile, witness statements were being gathered. Neighbors reported hearing shouting on the night of December 4000, Idov, but didn't intervene, thinking it was just another argument. Friends, acquaintances confirmed that tensions between Anna and her mother had escalated in recent months, mostly over the subject of treatment. One university lecturer shared that, shortly before returning to Moldova, Anna had seemed unstable and often spoke about feeling pressured by her family. Anna's father, Vasily Aladov, did not speak publicly. However, relatives from his side of the family claimed they did not believe she was responsible, suggesting that she may have experienced a psychological breakdown. The story of a medical student accused of committing a crime against her physician mother spread rapidly through regional and international news. Final hearings were held in Chisinau in December 2021. By then, the investigation had lasted nearly a year. Dozens of interviews had been conducted, independent evaluations ordered, and psychiatric records reviewed. The trial itself was closed to the public, but the main findings were later confirmed by official sources. According to a psychiatric evaluation, at the time of the incident, Anna was in a psychological state that prevented her from fully understanding the nature and consequences of her actions. The assessment revealed signs of a severe mental disorder, exacerbated by psychoactive substances and emotional instability. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentence, insisting Anna was fully responsible for her actions. They pointed to the sequence of events following the crime: cleaning herself, changing clothes, and attempting to flee, as evidence of intent and awareness. However, the defense submitted additional medical reports and expert testimony, all reinforcing the argument that Anna had lost control of her behavior. After reviewing both sides, the court accepted the findings of the psychiatric experts Anna Lajkovic was ruled not criminally responsible and was ordered to undergo compulsory treatment at a high-security psychiatric facility. The sentence was open-ended. Her release would only be possible if a medical board determined she had shown consistent, verifiable improvement. Public reaction to the verdict was deeply divided. Some in Gagosiya and Chisinau considered it a just outcome, while others saw it as preferential treatment, possibly influenced by family connections. Journalists noted that in Moldova, where life sentences for women are not legally permitted, this verdict amounted to indefinite institutionalization. After the court's decision was announced, prosecutors filed an appeal, but the ruling was upheld. Anna's father declined to speak publicly. Her maternal relatives expressed hope that she would receive the care she needed and never return to her former life.